Okay, it's 3:02. Let's make a start. The replays are on, and people can catch up on the replays, the parts that they have missed. So, thank you, Mahesh, once again. This is the seventh session where we are um, going through Sri Aurobindo's epic poem, Savitri, and we are at a very crucial and interesting juncture. Savitri has been arguing with Yama, death, and those arguments have kind of traversed the path of the critical, the vital to psychic to divine, and Savitri has elevated arguments on love to divine and proven her mettle. And this week, Maheshji, you have promised us that. You're gonna take us through how Yama grants the boon. So, without further ado, I'm gonna hand it over to you to take us through what you want to cover today.
Yeah, sure, Hen. Thank you again. Good evening, everybody. Right at the outset, I will have to say that I'm going to disappoint you guys because I don't think we'll be able to reach the portion where the boon itself is actually granted. Because as I was going through the sections, the subsequent sections, the arguments are too good not to be read out. So I was, as always, I was torn between, do I cover this or, do I let you guys pursue this on your own? I couldn't decide either way. So what I've done is I've bookmarked all the portions that I want to cover. So we'll see how much we are able to sort of cover today. And if we are not able to close it today, then we'll sort of spill over to the next week. Because there
So,
was, the,
yeah, sorry, no, so that
yeah.
that means it's not a disappointment at all because for me, this has gone on for this is the seventh week, and I'm so thoroughly enjoying this. It would be a disappointment to finally wind up, but if it's going to prolong, then yes, yay.
Thank you for that. Because Sri Aurobindo is doing something very specific with the process in which the boon itself is granted. Now, I don't want to throw out any spoilers, so I'm not going to comment on that aspect, but I'll just take you guys through it so that you can savor it for yourselves, right? So, with that, let me just begin. So, just to remind, we are in Book 10, the Book of the Double Twilight. Canto is 2, the Gospel of Death and Vanity of the Ideal. And we ended last week with Savitri making her statement, the most important one. This came up in the questions people were asking, I think, including Shiva was asking about that. So, advance, O death, beyond the phantom beauty of this world, for of its citizens I am not one. I cherish God the fire, not God the dream. So this is the statement Savitri ends with, and we'll continue with how death is responding to her. But death once more inflicted on her heart the majesty of his calm and dreadful voice. A bright hallucination are thy thoughts, a prisoner hailed by a spiritual god. Of thy own sensuous will, the ardent slave, thou sendest, eagle poised to meet the sun, words winged with the red splendor of thy heart. But knowledge dwells not in the passionate heart. The heart's words fall back unheard from wisdom's throne. Vain is thy longing to build heaven on earth. Artificer of ideal and idea, mind, child of matter in the womb of life, to higher levels persuades his parents' steps. Inapt, they follow ill the daring guide. But mind, a glorious traveller in the sky, walks lamely on the earth with footsteps slow. Hardly he can mould the life's rebellious stuff. Hardly can he hold the galloping hoofs of sense. His thoughts look straight into the very heavens. They draw their gold from a celestial mine. His acts work painfully a common ore. All thy high dreams were made by matter's mind. To Silas, its dull work in matter's jail, its only house where it alone seems true. So look at the way death is responding. So death has this one master key, right? I mean, I shouldn't call it one master key. He seems to have many master keys because as we go, you will see that especially for us who are still in the mortal mold, his arguments, like I said, over and over again, his arguments make perfect sense. So what death is saying is, all your thoughts are only a hallucination, right? And he's saying, you're sending all your thoughts, your passionate thoughts, that return, unheard from wisdom's throne, right? So he says, you're longing to build a heaven on earth. He says it's vain, it's not going to happen. And the illusory nature of the mind, the nature of matter, the nature of life, he's attacking these primary principles because these are the basis, foundational elements of which we are composed, and the context with which we are most familiar. Because for most of us, to say that you have a soul is like it's an act of faith, frankly speaking, right? Because there is a soul because the sages have said so, but have you felt it? Have you felt anything of it? The short answer is no. All that you feel is matter, mind, and a life, and that too not in their entirety, right? You feel a little speck of it, and that's the argument that death is making, right? Now, all so I'm going to skip uh, a significant amount of portion here, and I'll just move ahead in the dialogue. We are still with death. So all upon matter stands as on a rock, yet the security and guarantor pressed for credentials and impostor proves, a cheat of substance where no substance is, an appearance and a symbol and a knot. Its forms have no original right to birth. Its aspect of a fixed stability is the cover of a captive motion's world, an order of the steps of energy's dance, whose footmarks leave forever the same signs, a concrete face of unsubstantial time, a trickle dotting the emptiness of space. So he says, all upon matter stands as a rock. But he says, but when you press it for credentials, he says it proves that it's an impostor, right? A cheat of substance where no substance is. Says it's only an appearance, a symbol and a knot. Its forms have no original right to birth. Says there's no business for matter to have given birth to forms. He says it just shouldn't have happened, right? And the illusory nature of the whole thing, right? He's highlighting it. So he says, "Who an order of the steps of energy's dance, whose footmarks leave forever the same signs, a concrete face of unsubstantial time, a trickle dotting the emptiness of space. What seemed most real once is nihil's show. Its figures are snares that trap and prison the sense. The beginningless void was its artificer. Nothing is there but aspects limned by chance and seeming shapes of seeming energy. All by death's mercy breathe and live a while. All think and act by the inconscient's grace. Now, see the way he has turned the argument, right? So he's clearly pointing out the fact that everything came from the inconscience, the basis of life and your form is matter, right? So he says everything is only by the inconscient grace. There's a beautiful inversion that's happening here. And notice what it's doing. The sage says that the divine is on the top. It's on the superconscient heights. That's the maker. Now, because you can't see the maker, and it's an act of faith for a long, long time until you actually make the contact with that poise of consciousness. Death is very beautifully, very skillfully inverting the whole norm, right? He's inverting the norm and saying, "Boss, death it's by the inconscience grace that you're surviving, right? Turn not thy one second. At last, to open thy eyes, consent and see the stuff of which thou and the world are made. Inconscient, in the dumb inconscient void, inexplicably a moving world sprang forth. A while secure, happily insensible, it could not rest content with its own truth. So I'll skip a few more lines. I, death, was king and kept my regal state, designing my unwilled, unerring plan, creating with a calm, insentient heart, and my sovereign power of unreality, obliging nothingness to take a form. Infallibly, my blind, unthinking force, making by chance a fixity like fates, by whim the formulas of necessity, founded on the hollow ground of the inane, the sure bizarrerie of nature's scheme. Now look at the way he's framing it, right? He says, in my sovereign power of unreality. Now you look at this beautiful way because that in one schema, which the Hindus follow, Maya is considered the energy of the Lord. It's his creative capacity by which the worlds have been created. So they seem like an illusion, but they have a tangibility, a very strong tangibility, right? All the play of existence, the leela of existence is happening by his Maya. Now look at the way he's claiming it. Look at the way death is claiming that power, right? So uh, one second. In my sovereign power of unreality, obliging nothingness to take a form, infallibly my blind, unthinking force, making by chance a fixity like fates. Now, there's a very dangerous ground to tread, right? See, fate is something, if you can imagine, all the normal conceptions of fate, it is considered as iron law. You can't bend it, you can't change it. But look at to whom death gives authorship for that sort of a fate, right? He says, making by chance a fixity like fates, by whim the formulas of necessity, right? Founded on the hollow ground of the immune. I curved the vacant ether into space. A huge, expanding and contracting breath harbored the fires of the universe. And he goes on, death goes on, where he's describing the details in our creation from the ground up and all your significant entities, right? He claims ownership of all of them, step by step, right? And and somewhere he also describes the process, the sequence in which things are brought into play, right? So then thought came in and spoiled the harmonious world. So he has described everything, all the insentient things, right? Matter and atom and gas and everything, right? Everything is sort of put into place. And then look at on whom he puts the blame. Then thought, this is capital T, thought, right? Thought. Then thought came in and spoiled the harmonious world. Matter began to hope and think and feel. Tissue and nerve bore joy and agony. The inconscient cosmos strove to learn its task. An ignorant personal God was born in mind, and to understand invented reason's law, the impersonal vast throbbed back to man's desire. A trouble rocked the great world's blind, still heart, and nature lost her wide, immortal calm. Now, remember, I think it was in the last session where, Dick makes this statement. I'm just paraphrasing, I don't remember the exact line. You remember when he says, I'll give peace to man if peace to man is just, right? If it is just, I'll give it to him. And then we sort of wondered between us, what is it that man has done that he ought to be the recipient of this special punishment, this agony and anguish? And you see the reason here. So death is saying, until you guys came about, as in man with thought, right? Conscious thought. Until you guys came about, he says, nature was calm. Everything was perfectly okay, right? But once thought came, right? And because through you, the inconscient cosmos strove to learn its task, and tissue and nerve bore joy and agony. Now, before man came about, all of these were there, but there was no conscious mind, so it could pass, right? And that's why he says, a trouble wrought the great world's blind, still heart, and nature lost her wide, immortal calm. Thus came this warped, incomprehensible scene, of souls enmeshed in life's delight and pain, and matter's sleep and mind's mortality, of beings in nature's prison waiting death, and consciousness left in seeking ignorance, and evolution's slow arrested plan. This is the world in which thou movest, astray in the tangled pathways of the human mind, in the issueless circling of thy human life, searching for thy soul and thinking God is here. But where is room for soul or place for God in the brute immensity of a machine? It's excellent crowning question, right? He has laid bare all the facts. So he's one after another. So, he says of matters and matters sleep and mind's mortality. All of this has come about of beings in nature's prison waiting death and consciousness left in seeking ignorance and evolution's slow arrested plan. Right? Says this is the context in which you are, but where is room for soul or praise for God in the brute immensity of a machine? A transient breath thou takest for thy soul, born from a gas, a plasm, a sperm, a gene, a magnified image of man's mind for God, a shadow of thyself thrown upon space. Interposed between the upper and nether void, thy consciousness reflects the world around in the distorting mirror of ignorance, or upwards turns to catch imagined stars. Now, look at the way he's calling he's calling the heaven above. I mean, if we were to be honest with ourselves, right? But for the evidence of scripture and Purana, Itihasa, whatever, right? But for that evidence, if you were left alone with only the data of your own personal experience as the material that you have to go with, but heaven is empty for you. You don't know where it is. You do not know if it's inside, within, where. No one has gone there. No one, I mean, at least you do not know anyone who has gone there, right? And that's why when he says interposed, a shadow interposed between the upper and nether void. So our man is so beautifully, so he's, we know that at the base of the inconscient you have the void, right? The nothingness is there. So that's the nether void. And he says even upper, even that, between the upper and nether void, he says it's your consciousness is reflecting the world around in the distorting mirror of ignorance, or upwards turns to catch imagined stars. Or if a half truth is playing with the earth, throwing its light on a dark, shadowy ground, it touches only and leaves a luminous smudge. Immortality thou claimest for thy spirit, but immortality for imperfect man, a God who hurts himself at every step, would be a cycle of eternal pain. Brilliant way to corner Savitri. He says, immortality you are asking for your spirit, but immortality for imperfect man, a God who hurts himself at every step. And he says, no, don't ask for that because it would be a cycle of eternal pain. Wisdom and love thou claimest as thy right, but knowledge in this world is error's mate, a brilliant procuress of nescience, and human love a posturer on earth's stage who imitates with verve a fairy dance. An extract pressed from hard experience, man's knowledge cast in the barrels of memory has the harsh savor of a mortal draught, a sweet secretion from the erotic glands, flattering and torturing the burning nerves. Love is a honey and poison in the breast, drunk by it as the nectar of the gods. So, yeah, he says, don't you're asking immortality for man, and if this creature, a god who can hurt himself at every step, if I give him that power, he says, it would be a cycle of eternal pain. Look at how brilliantly he has framed the argument, right? And he goes on to pinpoint what the so-called love of Savitri is, right? And knowledge also, right? So love is a honey and poison in the breast, drunk by it as nectar of the gods. Earth's human wisdom is no great browed power, and love no gleaming angel from the skies. If they aspire beyond earth's dulled air, arriving sunwards with frail waxen wings, how high could reach that forced unnatural flight? But not on earth can divine wisdom reign. And not on earth can divine love be found. Heaven born, only in heaven can they live, or else they too, perhaps they are shining dreams. Now, so he says, love is not a gleaming angel, right? And if you are still aspiring, to that, to move beyond this mortal air, to move beyond this dull earthly air, and you want to go towards the sun of that ideal with frail waxen wings, he says, how high could you reach that forced unnatural flight? Says because to every region there is a law, and that's the angle that he's going for. But not on earth can divine wisdom reign, and not on earth can divine love be found. Heaven born, only in heaven can they live, or else there too perhaps they are shining dreams. Look at the way how carefully, he's framed the argument, right? So first of all, he's saying, that which is born in heaven, you can't aspire for. Whatever is meant to be there, it'll be there. Whatever you are owed in the earthly air, in the earth's dullard air, that's what you're going to get. But in addition, he says, don't ask for it. But even if you were to sort of go there, right? He says, even there, perhaps they are shining dreams, right? Nay, is not all thou art and doest a dream? Thy mind and life are tricks or are tricks of matter's force. If thy mind seems to thee a radiant sun, if thy life runs a swift and glorious stream, this is the illusion of thy mortal heart, dazzled by a ray of happiness or light, impotent to live by their own right divine, convinced of their brilliant unreality, when their supporting ground is cut away, these children of matter into matter die. Again, says the fleeting awareness or idea in your heart that there is a soul, there is something. He says it's only tricks of mind and life, and that trait, that capacity belongs to matter, right? So he says, this is the illusion of the immortal heart, dazzled by a ray of happiness. And most of us have felt it, right? As in, a little bit of affection from somebody, or the first hint of love, or a little bit of knowledge, you suddenly seem filled, and there is a irrational confidence that comes into play. You feel all powerful, or perhaps a large bank account, right? Suddenly there's a inflow of large amount of money, suddenly you feel invincible, right? And this is a known, a very conscious feeling and failing of humanity. And that's what death is pointing at, right? So he says, this is the illusion of the immortal heart. It is dazzled by a ray of happiness or light. So these children of matter into matter die. Even matter vanishes into energy's vague, and energy is a motion of old not. How shall the ideal's unsubstantial hues be painted stiff on earth's vermilion blur? A dream within a dream come doubly true. So, look at this, right? Look at the way he's unwrapping the process. Even matter vanishes into energy's vague, and energy is a motion of old not. So this is like your dream within a dream, right? Which comes in that movie. For the name, but so he says, a dream within a dream, he says, can it become doubly true? How can that be? Right? So I'm going to skip this argument again. It goes on for a little more while. I'll just read out the end of the canto because I think there is a couple of important lines there. So, O earthly creature, with thy dream of heaven, obey, resigned and still, the earthly law. Accept the brief light that falls upon thy days. Take what thou canst of life's permitted joy, submitting to the ordeal of fate's scourge. Suffer what thou must of toil and grief and care. They shall approach, silencing thy passionate heart, my long, calm night of everlasting sleep. There, into the hush from which thou camest, retire. So, not only is he framing death as the release, but he has also framed the fact, the birth of Savitri itself. He says it's from that hush you came, and you're only going back, right? So there's nothing new that's happening here. So, to make her more comfortable, right? And to uh, relieve her of her illusions, so to speak, right? That's how he's framing it. Now we shift chapters, right? So the again we are in book 10, the book of the double twilight. We move to Canto 3 now. Canto 3, it's called The Debate of Love and Death. Now, there is a lot of back and forth, and it is explicitly because of this section that I was sort of reluctant to not take you guys through some of its more important sequences. So, uh, I'm going to begin. Uh, I'll skip a few lines at the beginning of this canto and jump straight to the dialogue. But Savitri answered to Almighty Death, O dark browed sophist of the universe, who veilest the real with its own idea, hiding with brute objects nature's living face, masking eternity with thy dance of death. Thou hast woven the ignorant mind into a screen, and made of thought error's purveyor and scribe, and a false witness of mind's servant sense. Now, Savitri is turning back her game. So Death is saying, I'm the creator, I did all of this, and so on, right? But look at the way she's addressing Death. Oh, dark browed sophist of the universe, a fine arguer, a very eloquent arguer. But he says, but you're a dark browed sophist who veils the real with its own idea, hiding with brute objects nature's living face, masking eternity with thy dance of death. Thou hast woven the ignorant mind into a screen. So she's sort of turning back into him. I mean, turning back the argument against him. An aesthete of the sorrow of the world, champion of a harsh and sad philosophy, thou hast used words to shutter out the light and called in truth to vindicate a lie. So he says, you're a champion of a harsh and sad philosophy. And look at the way she's framing it, right? Thou hast used the words to shutter out the light and called in truth, truth with a capital T, to vindicate a lie. Now, this is your, devil quoting the scripture line, right? If you remember that, this is exactly what Death was doing all along, and Savitri has sort of caught hold of it, right? And she's addressing that particular point straight away. A lying reality is falsehood's crown, and a perverted truth her richest gem. O death, thou speakest truth, but truth that slays. I answer to thee with the truth that saves. Now, these are very famous lines in Savitri, all quoted often everywhere. So it says, O death, thou speakest the truth, but truth that slays. I answer to thee with the truth that saves. Now, this is a very curious phenomena, right? This is all is the divine perspective taken to its, utter conclusion, right? So remember when Sri Aurobindo or or Hindu thought in general, Hindus, religious thought in general, if you think of it, there are no permanent asuras or permanent rakshasas. They always have some form of release, which they can have. And you would find often, especially in the Purana, this thinking on how the Ashura became the Ashura and what is the means of his redemption, his or her redemption, right? And that is what is being reflected here. He says death is also truth. Now, that's a truth you can't deny, right? But it says, "Oh, thou speakest the truth, but truth that slays. I answer to thee with the truth that saves." A traveler, new discovering himself, one made of matter's world his starting point. He made of nothingness his living room, and night a process of the eternal light, and death a spur towards immortality. Again, that beautiful. Now look at the shift. So rather than framing, death and eternity and immortality as polarities, that stand on opposite end of the spectrum, Savitri has shifted the argument, right? She's saying, look at the line that she's using, right? He says, yes, one made of matter's world, his starting point. Yes, true. Says he made of nothingness his living room, true, and night a process of the eternal light. So, night with a capital N, and death a spur towards immortality. God wrapped his head from sight in matter's cowl, in matter's hood, right? God wrapped his head from sight in matter's cowl. His consciousness dived into inconscient depths. All knowledge seemed a huge dark nescience. Infinity wore a boundless zero's form. His abysms of bliss became insensible deeps. Eternity, a blank spiritual vast. Now, Savitri is describing all the reversals that is said to have taken place at the point of creation, right? And one of Sri Aurobindo's aphorisms is a beautiful a way to sort of understand this phenomena, right? Because it's very integral to Sri Aurobindo's uh, not only his philosophy but to his spiritual experience. The experience of the negating principles, and not only the higher regions of light and bliss and joy and whatnot, but also the experience of the underlying layers, the layers down below, right? So you know that these are not mere uh, what do you say schematic necessities that he has posited, saying okay, there is a subconscient and there is an inconscient. No, right? That's the mistake we shouldn't make, because these are states of consciousness which many of the Vedic rishis have experienced, and then some of the people since then, like Sri Aurobindo, have experienced the subconscient states and the inconscient states. So all those reversals are being described. Says God has hidden his head in matter's cowl, in matter's hood. His consciousness dived into inconscient depths. All knowledge seemed a huge dark nescience. Infinity wore a boundless zero's form. His abysms of bliss became insensible deeps. Eternity, a blank spiritual vast. So right now, if you look at it, there is a growing. Savitri is revealing more of what she knows. Not only that, and she's sort of uh, how do I put it? She's sort of attacking the first principles. So what do we mean by the first principle? See, because death, when death is arguing, so he's arguing about how he made the world and how he is the only law and truth and whatnot, right? But there are things that go beyond the scope of death, because even death came to be at a particular point. Now Savitri has sort of gone back in time. She's gone back in time. She's going to the very big bang of that, when existence sort of came to be, and she's describing the process from there. So she's saying this is what happened, right? The timeless took its ground in emptiness and drew the figure of a universe, that the spirit might adventure into time and wrestle with adamant necessity, and the soul pursue a cosmic pilgrimage. That's a beautiful line. And the soul pursue a cosmic pilgrimage, right? That's the reason why all this was created. Right? I'll skip a few lines and give me a second. So I'll skip this paragraph and just move to the next one. We are still with Savitri because there is a very important transition that you guys need to notice here. O death, thou lookest on an unfinished world, assailed by thee, and of its road unsure, peopled by imperfect minds and ignorant lives, and sayest God is not, and all is vain. How shall the child already be the man? Because he is infant, shall he never grow? Because he is ignorant, shall he never learn? Now, look at the way she's looking at the problem. So, death, remember this important. I said this transition is important. Death has a certain finality to all the data he's putting forth. He acts as if it's all done, it's finished. This is what it is, this is the law, it's been around for a long time, and that is why I'm eternal. And the release that I can give you, through death is your release, it's your peace. And beyond that, there is nothing. But you notice what is entering right now. Savitri is saying, no, this process is an ongoing process, right? And that's why she says, thou lookest on an unfinished world, assailed by thee, and of its road unsure, peopled by imperfect minds and ignorant lives. and says God is not in all his vain. So he says the specimens that you have right now of humanity, it's all imperfect minds, and these are ignorant folks, right? These are ignorant lives. Says it is still unfinished. God's work is still ongoing. And look at the argument she's making. How shall the child already be the man? Because he is infant, shall he never grow? Because he is ignorant, shall he never learn? Now, this is a wonderful way to how do I put this? There's a wonderful way to remind ourselves that all the knowledge that we have learned, all the science that we have learned, all the philosophies, all of it uh, uh, can only do so much because the harsh reality of death is still there. So you have not grown, you're still a kid. Right? You can fool yourself, by talking philosophy, thinking I'm very wise and all of that. But no, there are the simple facts of life, right? Death is still there. You're still ignorant, and just as a nice little reminder of that, the way Savitri says, "How shall the child already be the man?" But there is still hope, right? Because he's infant, shall he never grow? Because he's ignorant, shall he never learn? In a small, fragile seed, a great tree lurks. In a tiny gene, a thinking being is shut. A little element in a little sperm, it grows and is a conqueror and a sage. Then wilt thou spew out death, God's mystic truth, deny the occult spiritual miracle? Still wilt thou say there is no spirit, no God? Now, look at this argument that she's making. Yes, will he never learn? But it is from this we have already come. We have already come so far, right? Now, how have we come so far? It says just like the way in a small fragile seed a great tree lurks, in a tiny gene a thinking being is shut. A little element in a little sperm, it grows and is a conqueror and a sage. He says, this is the mystic truth of God. And Savitri is saying, will you throw this out also? Right? And will you deny this occult spiritual miracle? Why is it a miracle? Because, I mean, it's because we are so how do I say, atrophied in this human condition, we don't see the wonder, right? But if you sort of think back in a contemplative moment, you realize what sort of a miracle it is to have a form and a being that can think and muse and dream and invent and all of that. So Savitri is asking death, will you say that there is no spirit, no God? A mute material nature wakes and sees. She has invented speech, unveiled a will. Something there waits beyond towards which she strives. Something surrounds her into which she grows. To uncover the spirit, to change back into God, to exceed herself is her transcendent task. So this says this mute material nature. Now remember that the journey that she has already traveled says this material nature has woken up, right? Woken up how? Because from the stone, because she is the stone and she is also us. This Prakriti is us. Now we can wake and see, and this she has sort of she has traveled this tremendous arc, right? This arc of evolution. She has come this far, and she says to uncover the spirit, to change back into God, right? To exceed herself is her transcendental. Guys, 1 second, guys. These cats are creating havoc. I don't know how much of it you heard, but yeah. They deny the occult spiritual miracle. She has invented speech, unveiled the will. Right? No, sorry, we read that already. In God concealed, the world began to be. Tardily, it travels towards manifest God. Now, this is a very, very important understanding. Again, Sri Aurobindo will sort of mention it in a thousand different ways, right? In God concealed, the world began to be. Now, so this is very different from some spiritual systems which posit that God is there separate, there is a place which He doesn't inhabit, and the world is created separately. Then He enters it again later, etc. Right? Now, the Vedic experience is entirely different. It says, when the sequence of creation came to be, the divine threw himself into these typal negations, right? Because he wanted to experience the entire arc and the power of his splendor and whatnot. So there is this complete negation into which comes to be, and from there he is sort of the imminent divine has already gone to support the evolution. And in fact, you will see this experience reflected both in the agenda, where mother at the base of the inconscience, she finds this uh, she finds this door, mystic door in one of her experiences. She takes a hammer and shatters it, and she also sees the sleeping deity there, right? And this is a Vedic experience, a typical Vedic experience, because the Vedic rishi would speak, saying, they would speak of it in such we would say a language of wonder, right? The Vedic rishi says, I saw the deity there at the base of the inconscient. Yes, it's that same deity which was there right up on the heights. Whatever was in the superconscient, I've seen him in the inconscient too. And that's what Agastya and Lopamudra are digging for. And that's what Agastya and, and Lopamudra are digging for. So uh, that's what Sri Aurobindo is sort of mentioning here, right? Our imperfection towards perfection toils. The body is the chrysalis of a soul. The infinite holds the finite in its arms. Time travels towards revealed eternity. Again, it's the same logic, right? The infinite holds the finite in its arms. Time travels towards revealed eternity, right? So I'm just going to skip a few more uh, lines. One moment, guys. Yeah, and these are some lines again. It's in the same dialogue section. Again, Savitri is continuing, but there are some things which are very important to us as sadhaks, right? So uh, when I say sadhaks, I mean it's meant for everybody, but we can derive the most help from it. This world is God fulfilled in outwardness. His ways challenge our reason and our sense. By blind brute movements of an ignorant force, by means we slight as small, obscure, or base, a greatness founded upon little things, he has built a world in the unknowing void. His forms he has masked from infinitesimal dust. His marvels are built from insignificant things. If mind is crippled, life untaught and crude, if brutal masks are there and evil acts, they are incidents of his vast and varied plot. His great and dangerous dramas needed steps. He makes with these and all his passion play. A play, and yet no play, but the deep scheme of a transcendent wisdom, finding ways to meet her Lord in the shadow and the night. Yeah, look at the way she is framing it, the way Sri Aurobindo is framing it, right? If mind is crippled, life is untaught and crude, if brutal masks are there and evil acts, they are incidents of his vast and varied plot. His great and dangerous dramas needed steps. Says these steps are needed. You can't escape it. You can say it's cruel, it's ugly, wild, etc., etc. But it is needed. Now, here I'd like to sort of step back and mention uh, this particular poem of Sri Aurobindo. It's called the Rakshasa. It's a pretty small poem. It's there as a part of his collected poems book. Uh, in that poem, Ravana is praying to Kali, right? Ravana is aspiring to Kali and praying to Kali and saying, give me power over the gods and let me rule this earth, right? So Kali grants the wish, and Ravana asks, "Will it be eternal then?" And Kali laughs at him. Kali laughs at Ravana. She says, "Neither you nor I are eternal." Look at the framing. Neither you nor I are eternal. We both are not. Right? She says, "After me, Mahakali will come." Right? And she says, "No, the greater Titan will come after you." Now there is a guy who's even bigger than you. He'll come after you, right? So she is, and as an aside, and Kali will then say, she'll say, because I've denied your boon, ask another one. And then Ravana says, okay, if I'm to end, if there is a termination to my power, there's a terminal end to my power. He'll say, ensure that it is God Himself who compels my fall. Right? He says, do that. Now, this is the reason I want. Now, the important thing is all the rishis would get worried and they'll go to Sri Krishna saying, what have you done? What is Kali doing now? What's happening here? Yeah, if you give this fellow power, as in if you give Ravana power, the rishis would say he would root out the priest from the earth. It'll all be iron and death and ruin and destruction, right? So why are you giving him this? Now, at that point, you should go read the dialogue which Sri Aurobindo says, he puts in the mouth of Sri Krishna. Sri Krishna says, only some of my law you know, Sages. He says, you help me run the world, but he says, you only some of my purpose you know. You do not know everything. He says, and there he gives the justification, right? In that poem, he'll very clearly say, he says the Titan, the Rakshasa and the Ashura, they come, they manifest. It's a demand that they get manifested because they take up the all the brutal elements from evolution. He says he's the one who bears the weight of that sin and sorrow and violence and cruelty and all of that. Now it's because he takes that portion. He says you guys can evolve. You can have the pleasant portion, the virtue and the nice little flowers and holiness and whatnot. He says you can do that because that fellow is taking the load. So he says you have to give him his play because he's critical to the work of evolution. So that's what is happening here, right? So if see, that's how you need to understand this line. If brutal masks are there and evil acts, they are incidents of his vast and varied plot. His great and dangerous dramas needed steps. He makes with these and all his passion play, a play, and yet no play, but the deep scheme of a transcendent wisdom, finding ways to meet her Lord in the shadow and the night. Above her is the vigil of the stars. Watched by a solitary infinitude, she embodies in dumb matter the divine, in simple minds and lives the absolute. A miracle monger, her mechanical craft, matter's machine, worked out the laws of thought. Life's engines served the labor of a soul. The mighty mother her creation wrought, a huge caprice, self bound by iron laws, and shut God into an enigmatic world. She lulled the omniscient into nescient sleep. Omnipotence on inertia's back she drove. Trod perfectly with divine unconscious steps the enormous circle of her wonder works. Immortality assured itself by death. The Eternal's face was seen through drifts of time. His knowledge he disguised as ignorance, his good he sowed in evil's monstrous bed, made error a door by which truth could enter in, his plant of bliss watered with sorrow's tears. Now, not only is Sri Aurobindo showing us that everything is a progression. Light, dark is only a passage of the light. It's a phase, right? Before the actual full-blown light can come through, right? And that's what he's doing, right? His knowledge he disguised as ignorance. His good he sowed in evil's monstrous bed. And look at this. And this is again a brilliant, brilliant line. Made error a door by which truth could enter in. Now ask yourself, why is he saying this, right? Think very carefully. Made error a door by which the truth could enter in. Now, this is where, again, we have to sort of go back to the Gita, right? Remember, moksha, the release, the condition of the spiritual release, is a state beyond the three gunas. So if you're aiming just for sattva, right, as a normal individual, let's say, you have the tamas, of course, the state of inertia and ignorance and darkness. Rajas is the state of activity, propulsion, action, creativity, and all of that. And then, the illuminated state, right? The purified state, the sattva. Now, remember, moksha is the condition which exceeds all this. You are not to be bound both by virtue or vice, right? And that's where Sri Krishna so tactfully lifts Arjuna up into that particular poise, because even virtue becomes a prison to you after some time, and truth is neither this nor that, right? And that's why he's saying, made error a door by which truth could enter in. Why? If you're stuck to your little understood virtue of a particular time, it becomes the amber, it becomes a prison in which you are fossilized. And that's why always question. I mean, within reason, right? Within reason, I mean, reason, and perhaps we can call it spiritual intuition. If you have not progressed, even though you are observing all the rituals and rites and you know meditation sessions and so on, ask yourself: Is am I stuck in this virtuous prison? Am I trapped here? Everyone is very cognizant of the prison of vice. You can very easily identify it. So you sort of fear it, you run away from it, and so on, right? But people are not aware of the golden cage of virtue. That's also a golden cage. And if you're stuck within that, the truth with a capital T cannot enter. And that's why Sri Aurobindo is saying, made error a door by which truth could enter. His plant of bliss watered with sorrow's tears. A dual nature covered the unique. In this meeting of the eternal's mingling masks, this tangled dance of passionate contraries, locking like lovers in a forbidden embrace, the quarrel of their lost identity. Through this wrestle and wrangle of the extremes of power, Earth's billion roads struggle towards deity. See, the dual nature covered the unique, right? And through this wrestle and wrangle of the extremes of power, Earth's million roads struggle towards deity. So imagine like a pilgrimage, right? So in all this clash of all these opposing natures, right? And they're all sort of moving in that direction. All stumbled on behind a stumbling guide, yet every stumble is a needed pace on unknown routes to an unknowable goal. All blundered and straggled towards the one divine. As if transmuted by a titan spell, the eternal powers assumed a dubious face. Right. So he goes on. He'll Sri Aurobindo will tell you where this transition happened, where these benevolent powers had to take on this terrible masks, right? These terrible forms, so that the world can progress, right? So again, look at that. Again, these are very, very lines that have personally helped me, right? All stumbled on behind a stumbling guide. Yet every stumble is a needed pace on unknown routes to an unknowable goal, all blundered and straggled on towards the one divine. Right? So, all your fall, all your errors, rather than beating ourselves about it, some amount of beating is necessary. You need to get thrashed now and then to be relatively sensible, but raising it to a obsession, so you take some of these spiritual practices where they whip themselves or lie on a bed of nails. We These are distortions, right? These more like fetishes, spiritual fetishes that people indulge in. These extremes that they go to for legitimate or illegitimate reasons. That's a different issue, right? But these extremes are not needed because error, even through error, truth will enter, right? Truth will enter, uh, uh, so I'm going to skip a whole bunch of lines, but there's a beautiful sequence that comes here. I just want to read out that portion. One second, guys. Again, we are still with Savitri, right? Even wisdom, hewer of the roads of God, is a partner in the deep, disastrous game. Now, remember that, all these powers, the good and the bad, all of them, see, even the good forces had to take on this terrible mask because they had to obey some necessity, right? So remember that. But this way, Savitri is making a distinction, right? Even wisdom, hewer of the roads of God, he's the one who's sort of, breaking the mountainous path and making a road for you to go to reach God, is a partner in the deep disastrous game. Now, look at how messed up the condition is, right, for humans. Lost is the pilgrim's wallet and the script. She fails to read the map and watch the star. A poor, self righteous virtue is her stock, and reason's pragmatic grope or abstract sight, or the technique of a brief hour's success, she teaches an usher in utility school. And look at the way Sri Aurobindo is facing it. A poor, self righteous virtue is her stock. That's all she knows. And reason's pragmatic grope or abstract sight, or the technique of a brief hour's success, she teaches. Says that's your utility school. It's the most basic of things. And what did you gain? And what did what is this technique that you got? He says from a brief technique of a brief hour's success. You know, on the ocean surface of vast consciousness, small thoughts in shoals are fished up into a net, but the great truths escape her narrow cast. Guarded from vision by creation's depths, obscure they swim in blind, enormous gulfs, safe from the little sounding leads of mind, too far for the puny diver's shallow plunge. Says, this surface of ocean surface of vast consciousness. Small thoughts in shoals are filled up into a net, but the great truths escape her narrow cast. Right, and there's a beautiful saying in Tamil sort of that is there in a similar direction, right? It says கற்றது கையளவு கல்லாதது உலகளவு. So it basically, crude translation would be all knowledge. Only a fistful is all knowledge, is all learned knowledge. Says and the unlearned, the things that you're ignorant about, says it's worldwide. It's as wide as the world. So all that you have gained is only that learnt knowledge which you can hold in the fist of your hand. So that's the sort of poise that Sri Aurobindo is referring to, right? Small thoughts and shoals are fished up into a net, but the great truths escape her narrow cast, right? Guarded from vision by creation's depths, it's so deep. Obscure they swim in blind, enormous gulfs. It has no gaze on the deep heart of things. Our knowledge walks leaning on error's staff, a worshipper of false dogmas and false gods, or fanatic of a fierce, intolerant creed, or a seeker doubting every truth he finds, a skeptic facing light with adamant no, or chilling the heart with dry, ironic smile, a cynic stamping out the God in man. Beautiful exposition, right? It says your knowledge is walking, leaning on error stuff, and all your, the latest scientist, latest this fellow. Look at, everything. Look at the way Sri Aurobindo is framing it, right? A worshipper of false dogmas and false gods, or fanatic of a fierce, intolerant creed, or a seeker doubting every truth he finds, a skeptic facing light with adamant no, or chilling the heart with dry, ironic smile, a cynic stamping out the God in man. A darkness wallows in the paths of time, or lifts its giant head to blot the stars. It makes a cloud of the interpreting mind and intercepts the oracles of the sun. Yet light is there. It stands at nature's doors. It holds a torch to lead the traveler in. It waits to be kindled in our secret cells. It is a star lighting an ignorant sea. As knowledge grows, light flames up from within. It is a shining warrior of the mind, an eagle of dreams in the divining heart, an armor in the fight, a bow of God. Then larger dawns arrive, and wisdom's palms cross through the being's dim, half lighted fields. Philosophy climbs up thought's cloud-banked peaks, and science stares out nature's occult powers. Enormous jinns who serve a dwarf's small needs exposes the sealed minutiae of her art and conquers her by her own captive force. So, he says, but Says all this is there, but yet the light is there. Light with a capital L is there. And look at the way Sri Aurobindo was saying, it stands at nature's doors. It's there on your very doorstep. It holds a torch to lead the traveler in. It waits to be kindled in our cells. Right? And knowledge, as knowledge grows, light flames up within. Now look at the sequence. Look at the sequence. As knowledge grows, light with a capital L flames up from within. It is a shining warrior in the mind. No, this is the illuminate. This is not this, trivial, quantum physics or whatever, right? This is not that knowledge. This is the inner knowledge that comes from Agni, that illumination that comes from Agni. So that's the capital L. It is a shining warrior in the mind, an eagle of dreams in the divining heart, an armor in the fight, above of God. Then larger dawns arrive. Now remember, this is not the end of the sequence. Now this is your Usha, right? This is the Usha of the Veda, right? It's Usha of the Veda, the spiritual dawn. Then larger dawns arrive, and wisdom pomps, cross through the being's dim, half-lighted fields. Philosophy climbs up thought's cloud-bank peaks, and science stares out nature's occult powers. So, Sri Aurobindo goes on to describe this sequence, right? So I'm going to skip a large section here, and give me a second, guys. And so I've skipped a couple of pages, and again, we are still with Savitri. This is the debate of love and death. Uh, but Sri Aurobindo describes the role of nature, you know. So the question is this: the question that is implicitly being answered is where, how did nature, who's a form of the mother, Prakriti, how did it become so antagonistic towards man? What happened? Now suddenly everything seems to oppose. For man especially, not for animals. This is explicitly for humans, right? At this current stage of evolution, somewhere she has turned into an antagonist. We are not getting what we want. It's not the mother's joy and her, comforting bosom that we have access to. It's all brute and harsh. It seems like a cruel world, and that's the thing that he would share when they was touching here. The souls of men have wandered from the light, and the great mother turns away her face. The eyes of the creatrix bliss are closed, and sorrow's touch has found her in her dreams. As she turns and tosses on her bed of void, because she cannot wake and find herself, and cannot build again her perfect shape, oblivious of of her nature and her state, forgetting her instinct of felicity, forgetting to create a world of joy, she weeps and makes her creatures' eyes to weep, testing with sorrow's edge her children's breasts. She spends on life's vain waste of hope and toil the poignant luxury of grief and tears. In the nightmare change of her half conscious dream, tortured herself and torturing by her touch, she comes to our hearts and bodies and our lives wearing a hard and cruel mask of pain. Our nature, twisted by the abortive birth, returns wry answers to life's questioning shocks. An acrid relish finds in the world's pangs, drinks the sharp wine of grief's perversity. Look at how Shirin is so beautifully describing that transition, right? Somewhere that link is lost, that the creatrix of the bliss, because it's her Ananda that created the world, right? She has turned away her face. Why? Because conscious man is, drifting off in a million directions apart from the one direction he's supposed to look at, right? So, and that's why he says, look at that. Forgetting her instinct of felicity, forgetting to create a world of joy. Now she weeps and makes her creature's eyes to weep, testing with sorrow's edge her children's breasts. She spends on life's vain waste of hope and toil. Now this should give us some, clue as to how an ideal life ought to be, right? There has to be effort, there has to be effort, but not vain waste of hope and toil. Life's vain waste of hope and toil. Now you spend this on what? The poignant luxury of grief and tears. Because even after you do that, what do you get? Right? It says, it's only the poignant luxury of grief and tears. And again, the poetry, right? In the nightmare change of her half-conscious dream, tortured herself and torturing by her touch. She comes to our hearts and bodies and our lives wearing a hard and cruel mask of pain. A curse is laid on the pure joy of life, delight, God's sweetest sign and beauty's twin, dreaded by aspiring saint and austere sage, is shunned, a dangerous and ambiguous cheat, a specious trick of an infernal power. It tempts the soul to its self-hurt and fall. A Puritan god made pleasure a poisonous fruit, or red drug in the marketplace of death, and sin the child of nature's ecstasy. Now, look at the way Sri Aurobindo is sort of framing it, right? Everything he has done. Now, look at what he's saying. A curse is laid on the pure joy of life. You need to enjoy life, right? Delight is God's sweetest sign and beauty's twin. But look at what he says dreaded by aspiring saint and austere sage. Why? Because it's a dangerous and ambiguous cheat, a specious trick of an infernal power. It tempts the soul to its self hurt and fall. Says a Puritan god made pleasure a poisonous fruit, or red drug in the marketplace of death, and sin the child of nature's ecstasy. Yet every creature hunts for happiness, buys with harsh pangs or tears by violence from the dull breast of the inanimate globe some fragment or some broken shard of bliss. Even joy itself becomes a poisonous draught. Its hunger is made a dreadful hook of fate. All means are held good to catch a single being. Eternity sacrificed for a moment's bliss. Yet, for joy and not for sorrow, earth was made, and not as a dream in endless suffering time. Although God made the world for his delight, an ignorant power took charge and seemed his will, and death's deep falsity has mastered life. All grew a play of chance, simulating fate. Uh, the thing, the way Shrimananda was saying, right? Pleasure is good, joy is good, right? Simple joy, simple pleasure is good. But there is an entrant, some devious power has entered the scheme that has made the mother with the capital M nature, right? To torture herself and torture us also, right? And there are these dubious philosophies that have warned you, saying you the moment you are happy, you experience a little bit of pleasure and joy, says you're going to be screwed. You are what do you say, it tempts the soul to self-hurt and fall, right? So, but he says, but still, even though these impediments are there, but the purpose of life is to hunt for happiness. And Sri Aurobindo is sort of recording the fact that all means are held good to catch a single being. But eternity sacrificed for a moment's bliss. But all said and done, he's saying, yet for joy and not for sorrow, earth was made, and not as a dream in endless suffering time. So I'll pause there again and move to another section. Give me a moment. So again, we are continuing the same conversation thread. Um, there is again a transition. So Savitri is making all these arguments, but there is an important transition here, and I thought I must read this out for you guys. Uh, because now the back and forth between Death and Savitri becomes more frequent, and it's like a little tango that they are doing, right? So again, the same book, Canto 3, Book of Love and Death, same conversation. Savitri is continuing. O death, I have triumphed over thee within. I quiver no more with the assault of grief. A mighty calmness seated deep within has occupied my body and my sense. You remember what I told you, right? As the conversation is proceeding, there are changes that are happening here. And Savitri, right now, she is sort of describing it herself. Before we were inferring, based on what poise and how she was talking, we were making these inferences. But now she's sort of declaring it herself. I have triumphed over thee within. I quiver no more with the assault of grief. A mighty calmness seated deep within has occupied my body and my sense. It takes the world's grief and transmutes to strength. It makes the world's joy one with the joy of God. My love eternal sits throned on God's calm. For love must soar beyond the very heavens and find its secret sense ineffable. It must change its human ways divine, yet keep its sovereignty of earthly bliss. O death, not for my heart's sweet poignancy, nor for my happy body's bliss alone, I have claimed from thee the living Satyavan, but for his work and mine, our sacred charge. Our lives are God's messengers beneath the stars. To dwell under death's shadow, they have come, tempting God's light to earth for the ignorant race. His love to fill the hollow in men's hearts, His bliss to heal the unhappiness of the world. For I, the woman, am the force of God, He, the eternal's delegate soul in man. My will is greater than thy law, O death. My love is stronger than the bonds of fate. Our love is the heavenly seal of the Supreme. I guard that seal against thy rending hands. Love must not cease to live upon the earth, for love is the bright link twixt earth and heaven. So, she's observing that change, and there is, and a mighty calmness seated deep within has occupied my body and my sense. And again, for those of you who are practitioners of Sri Aurobindo's yoga, the important, if you look at the letters, right, if you look at most of Master's letters on yoga, you will realize that one of the very first experiences, Sri Aurobindo would encourage you to have, or to request the mother or aspire to the mother to have, is that experience of peace. He says that's the foundation. On top of it, the peace and silence. That's the first thing that you got to establish, so to speak, as you're ascending to higher and higher levels, because only then the other elements can pour in. Now, without peace, if you don't establish that foundation, your system is likely to be, either suffering under the shock or get into some sort of a emotional instability and so on, right? You go raving, tear your clothes, cry tears, all of that. To some extent, tears are fine, but Sri Aurobindo always recommends, the peace and silence, absolute silence, and it's on that foundation that everything else comes. And that's why you will observe Savitri making that statement, right? It takes the world's grief and transmutes to strength. It makes the world's joy one with the joy of God. Now, because if you didn't have that silence and that capacity to be immovable, every shot from the world, every guy crying, every woe, every war, every injustice is going to move you. And even if you have to aid the world, you can't do a good job of it because you are disturbed. So you ought to get that foundation of peace and being immovable, the silence, right? You gain that silence, and then you could do something about it, and that's the sort of distinction, right? And she goes on to make that statement. She says, "I'm not asking this for my heart's sweet poignancy, nor for my happy body's bliss alone." And Savitri, for the first time, is revealing. Not just the fact that her love for Satyavan is real, but who sort of gave it, right? Our lives are God's messengers beneath the stars. To dwell under death's shadow, they have come, tempting God's light to earth for the ignorant race. Is for I, the woman, am the force of God, He, the eternal's delegate soul in man. My will is greater than thy law, O death. My love is stronger than the bonds of fate. Skip a few lines here. Love must not cease to live upon the earth, for love is the bright link twixt earth and heaven. Love is the far transcendence angel here. Love is man's lean on the absolute. But to the woman, death, the god, replied, with the ironic laughter of his voice discouraging the labor of the stars. Even so, men cheat the truth with splendid thoughts. Thus wilt thou hire the glorious charlatan mind to weave from his ideals gossamer air a fine raiment for thy body's new desires and thy heart's clutching greedy passion clothe. Dot not the web of life with magic hues. Make rather thy thought a plain and faithful glass, reflecting matter and mortality. And know thy soul a product of the flesh, a made up self in a constructed world. Thy words are large murmurs in a mystic dream. For how in the soiled heart of man could dwell the immaculate grandeur of thy dream built God? Or who can see a face and form divine in the naked two legged worm thou callest man? O human face, put off mind painted masks, the animal be, the worm and the worm that nature meant. Accept thy futile birth, thy narrow life, for truth is bare like stone and hard like death. Bare in the bareness, hard with the truth's hardness live. Look, it's like a little slap he's giving back, right? So all of these arguments she has made, she's saying love is transcendent and it's a link between earth and heaven and all of that. And look at the way death has responded. Even so, men cheat the truth with splendid thoughts. He says, "Thus wilt thou hire the glorious charlatan." He says, "Mine." He calls mine a charlatan, and but still glorious charlatan. His hired the glorious charlatan mind to weave from his ideals gossamer rare, or find raiment for thy body's new desires. He says, "Daub not the web of life with magic hues." He says, don't put this color and all, this additional special effect on life. He says, don't do it. Says, right? And he says, "Make rather thy thought a plain and faithful glass, reflecting matter and mortality." He says, whatever is there, reflect that. Don't put special effects on this thing. And know thy soul a product of the flesh, a made up self in a constructed world. He says, "Thy words are large murmurs in a mystic dream." Right? And or who can see a face and form divine in the naked two-legged worm thou callest man? Right? So he says, "Bare in the bareness, hard with the truth's hardness live." Now look at this transition. Now you again, like we have always said, you can't deny the argument that what do you say, death is making, right? Because it all seems like fancies, illusions, right? It's all cooked up by some storyteller, right? That's all whatever Savitri is saying, because you give occasion to a good dramatist, he can also conjure such fiction, right? Because all that she's saying is fiction. Based on faith only, you can go with what Savitri is saying. So he responds to that. He says, "Reflect reality, don't give me these conjured imaginations." Right? Now look at Savitri's response. "But Savitri, reply to the dire god, yes, I'm human. Yet shall man by me, since in humanity waits his hour, the god, trample thee down to reach the immortal heights, transcending grief and pain and fate and death. Yes, my humanity is a mask of God. He dwells in me, the mover of my acts, turning the great wheel of his cosmic work. I am the living body of his light. I am the thinking instrument of his power. I incarnate wisdom in an earthly breast. I am his conquering and unslayable will." Savitri is sort of, look at the way she's accepting something. Now, here is where, the distinction is, right? The distinction is this: yes, I'm human, but still, by me, man, once I've done my work, right? Since in humanity, which is our the God, man will trample thee down to reach the immortal heights, transcending grief and pain and fate and death. Says, my humanity, don't it says, don't just look at my humanity as this mortal flesh, the form that you're looking at right now. Is why? Because my humanity is a mask of God. He dwells in me, the mover of my acts, right? I'm the living body of his light. I'm the thinking instrument of his power. I incarnate wisdom in an earthly breast, right? I'm his conquering and unslayable will. The formless spirit drew in me its shape. In me are the nameless and the secret name. Now, for those of you again who are familiar with the Hindu cosmology, you know what's happening here, right? Because uh, at one level, look at the way she's saying, "In me are the nameless and the secret name, the one with form, the one without form." Right? She's edging towards that. Savitri is sort of moving, right? In the way she's sort of revealing more and more about her identity, who she is, what she's capable of. That little unveiling is happening very gradually, right? So the moment she says this, death comes back, right? Oh, priestess in imagination's house. It's almost funny, right? He's taunting her, he's teasing. Yes. O priestess in imagination's house, persuade first nature's fixed immutable laws, and make the impossible thy daily work. How canst thou force to wed two eternal foes? Irreconcilable in their embrace, they cancel the glory of their pure extremes, and unhappy wedlock maims their stunted force. How shall thy will make one the true and false? Where matter is all, there spirit is dream. If all are the spirit, matter is a lie. And who was the liar who forged the universe? The real with the unreal cannot mate. He who would turn to God must leave the world. He who would live in the spirit must give up life. He who has met the self renounces self. So he who has met the self is capital S, renounces self is that S is a small s. So if you want to meet the capital self, you'll have to renounce your smaller self. That's what all your nirvana, all of them, they all say the same thing. Now remember why Sri Aurobindo is going after this, right? Though he recognizes these paths, these realizations as specific milestones that the seeker ought to have attained, must attain, will attain, as a consequence of him growing in consciousness. Sri Aurobindo does not say that you have to negate everything and run away. Says for if needed for a small set of people for a short time, it might be a necessary discipline, because their swabhava needs it, demands it. But all of them eventually, what do you say? Castrate life. They want you to get away from all the joys, all the creativity, and spend it in chanting and beat counting and murmuring and whatnot, right? But life is gone. All the joys, the pleasures, the simple pleasures, all of that is gone. No, Sri Aurobindo is negating that directly, head on, right? Head on. So, so, uh, so that's why, look at the way death is saying, right? Where matter is all, their spirit is a dream. If all are the spirit, matter is a lie. And he says, who was the liar who forged the universe? So he says, you're trying to mix two different things. And that's why you look at these three important lines, right? Because this sums up a lot of the ascetic traditions. Now, he who would turn to God must leave the world. He who would live in the spirit must give up life. He who has met the self renounces self. The voyagers of the million roads of mind who have traveled through existence to its end, sages exploring the world ocean's vasts, have found extinction the soul harbors safe. Two only are the doors of man's escape: death of his body, matter's gate to peace; death of his soul, his last felicity. In me, all take refuge, for I, death, am God. Look at the argument, right? So not only has he given his observations of the spiritual process, he who would turn to God must leave the world. He who would live in the spirit must give up life. He who has met the self renounces self. But he goes on to say, the voyagers of the million roads of mind who have traveled through existence to its end, who, sages exploring the old ocean's vast, have found extinction the soul harbors in. Get blotted out in nirvana. That's the only solution. Why? Because two only are the doors of man's escape: death of his body, matter's gate to peace; death of his soul, his last felicity. So death is making this argument, brilliant argument, right? So only these two are the ways. You die, get lost, or you extinguish your soul into the void of nirvana or get blotted out. Then you have some sort of a release. Says beyond this, you have nothing, right? So, in me, all take refuge, for I, death, am God. But Savitri replied to mighty death, my heart is wiser than the reason's thoughts. My heart is stronger than thy bonds, O death. It sees and feels the one heartbeat in all. It feels the high transcendence, sun-like hands. It sees the cosmic spirit at its work. In the dim night, it lies alone with God. My heart's strength can carry the grief of the universe and never falter from its luminous track. Its wide, tremendous orbit through God's peace. It can drink up the sea of all delight and never lose the white spiritual touch, the calm that broods in the deep infinite. So Savitri is saying, no, I'm not going to listen to your reason, right? Because my heart can handle it. My heart is wiser than reason's thoughts. My heart is stronger than thy bonds. Right? And she says it feels, the heart can see and feel the one heartbeat in all, one heart, which is the capital H, right? The divine heartbeat in all. It feels the high transcendence, sun-like hands. It sees the cosmic spirit at its work. The all-pervading divine says, I can see it. I can see it doing its work, right? So she says, my heart's strength can carry the grief of the universe and never falter from its luminous track, and never lose the white spiritual touch, the calm that broods in the deep infinite. He said, now death is responding to that. Art thou indeed so strong, O heart, O soul, so free? And canst thou gather then bright pleasure from my wayside flowering boughs? Yet falter not from thy hard journey's goal? Meet the world's dangers touch and never fall? Show me thy strength and freedom from my loss. Now it's death. Death is sort of has had sort of enough with these arguments, right? She's just going back and forth, and she has said, I can hold my calm. I know my capacity, the calm that broods in the deep infinite. He says, I can bear the grief of the world. Savitri is saying, my heart can do that, and my heart can see the divine at play. So death is responding, saying, really, art thou indeed so strong, O heart, O soul, so free, right? Says, show me thy strength and freedom from my loss. Now he's throwing the gauntlet, right? He's throwing the dice. He's saying, okay, if you claim who you are, you're so powerful, say show it to me. Show me the freedom. Now, an important point, right? There is in the Hindu, what do you say, spiritual hierarchy, it is a fundamental fact. It's a fundamental uh, milestone or trait that you ought to have power. You ought to have siddhis. Of course, they sort of degraded it over a period of time for all these little vanishing trick, making vibhuti, etc., etc. Right? But but you ought to have siddhis. That's the mark of a spiritual man. You're not to be afraid. You ought to have power. You ought to have power over nature, right? And that's where there's the clarity, right? So there's not like oh, you're showing off siddhi, oh, you shouldn't, tantra is bad, my mummy will shout at me, none of that nonsense, right? He's saying, okay, if you claim that you're so powerful, show me what you can do you have freedom from my laws? Again, when he says freedom from my laws, I want you to sort of recollect Patanjali's Ashtasiddhis, right? It's very clear what are the laws of nature and how you can exceed them and what's the power you can have over them. For those of you who are not familiar, I would highly recommend that you go sort of read about what the Ashtasiddhis are, right? So that's what death is asking basically. But Savitri answered, surely I shall find among the green and whispering woods of life close bosomed pleasures. Because remember, he says, if you're so strong, he says, can you gather all the joys? He says, can you do it? Right? So it is to that question that he's responding, that Savitri is responding. Close bosomed pleasures, only mine since his, or mine for him, because our joys are one. And if I linger, time is ours and God's, and if I fall, is not his hand near mine? All is a single plan. Each wayside act deepens the soul's response, brings nearer the goal. Death, the contemptuous nihil, answered her. So prove thy absolute force to the wise gods by choosing earthly joy. For self, for you, demand, and yet from self and its gross masks live free. Then I will give thee all thy soul desires, all the brief joys earth keeps for mortal hearts. Only the one dearest wish that outweighs all, hard laws forbid, and thy ironic fate. He says, ask me anything that is there on earth, I'll give all of that. He says, but only one dearest wish that outweighs all. Because why so? Because hard laws forbid, and thy ironic fate. My will, once wrought, remains unchanged through time, and Satyavan can never again be thine. But Savitri replied to the vague power, if the eyes of darkness can look straight at truth, look in my heart, and, knowing what I am, give what thou wilt or what thou must, O death. Nothing I claim but Satyavan alone. There was a hush, as if of doubtful fates, As one disdainful still who yields a point, death bowed his sovereign head in cold assent. So death is agreeing, right? I give to thee, saved from death and poignant fate, whatever once the living Satyavan desired in his heart for Savitri. Look at how this trickster is working. He says he agreed. She's saying, okay, if you can give, it's only this I want, give me that. Now look at the way he has changed it, right? I give to thee, saved from death and poignant fate, whatever once the living Satyavan desired in his heart for Savitri. He's saying, as he was alive, he wished for you many things, right? But because Satyavan is dead, even his wishes have died, right? Obviously, right? Because the boy is dead, right? He says, I'll give you that. There's bright noons I give thee, and unwounded dawns. Daughters of thy own shape in heart and mind, fair hero sons and sweetness undisturbed of union with thy husband dear and true. And thou shalt harvest in thy joyful house felicity of thy surrounded eves. Love shall bind by thee many gathered hearts. The opposite sweetness in thy day shall meet of tender service to thy life's desired and loving empire over all thy loved. Two poles of bliss made one, O Savitri. Return, O child, to thy forsaken earth. Now, look at the transition, right? Because somewhere, even Death's heart is sort of melted, so to speak. He was all gaunt and black and looming and large and vast and dreadful, this title God. Now, see, he's saying, okay, I understand, because I've taken off this pillow, all of these joys that you would have otherwise had. What joys? Daughters of thy own shape and heart and mind, daughters just like you, fair hero sons, and sweetness undisturbed of union with thy husband dear and true. Says, and great evenings surrounded by loved ones and family and everything. He says, I'll give you that. He said, huh? Two folds of bliss made one, O Savitri. Return, O child, to thy forsaken earth. But Savitri replied, thy gifts resist. Earth cannot flower if I lonely return. Says no. Says again no. Right? He says your gifts are resisting. What? Resisting what? Resisting the eventual destiny that she has to get to. Earth cannot flower if I lonely return. Says if I go back alone, he says there's no more joy for me. There's no spring on earth. Nothing is there. Right? Uh, then death sent forth once more his angry cry, as chides a lion his escaping prey. What knowest thou of earth's rich and changing life? Who thinkest that one man dead all joy must cease? Says, what do you even know of life on earth? Says, who thinkest that one man dead, one Satyavan is dead, and all joy is gone for you? All joy must cease. Hope not to be unhappy till the end, for grief dies soon in the tired human heart. Now look at that psychology. Psychology. You can't be sad forever. Because why? For grief dies soon in the tired human heart. Soon other guests the empty chamber fill. A transient painting on a holiday's floor, traced for a moment's beauty, love was made. Or if a voyager on the eternal trail, its objects fluent change in its embrace, like waves to a swimmer upon infinite seas. Says no. He says, it's a transient painting on a holiday's floor, traced for a moment's beauty, only love was made. Right? So what the heart loves, he says it changes very fluently, right? Like waves to a swimmer upon infinite seas. But Savitri replied to the vague god, give me back Satyavan, my only lord. Thy thoughts are vacant to my soul that feels the deep, eternal truth and transient things. Important point. So death is saying it's only transient. Even that love that you feel, the objects to which your love goes and catches hold of, it says even that will change because that's the way of earth. But Savitri's response, he says no. Why so? The thoughts are vacant to my soul that feels the deep eternal truth in transient things. Says I know that these are transient, like as you're saying. But she says, but I know the truth that is there behind them, the eternal truth that is behind them. Right? And again, death answered her, return and try thy soul. Soon shalt thou find a peace that other men on lavish earth have beauty, strength, and truth. And when thou hast half forgotten, one of these shall wind himself around thy heart that needs some human answering heart against thy breast. He says, no, this earth is full of beautiful men. There are lots of men are there, right? Who have beauty and strength and truth. And when you have, sort of partly forgotten Satyavan, half forgotten, one of these brilliant men will wind himself around thy heart that needs some human answering heart against thy breast. For who, being mortal, can dwell glad alone? Then Satyavan shall glide into the past, a gentle memory pushed away from thee by new love and thy children's tender hands, till thou shalt wonder if thou lovedst at all. It's like a cruel, logic, right? This is reality for many, 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 many people. He says, for who being mortal can dwell glad alone? Who can be happy alone, right? So you will find someone who's as good as him, if not more, and so on. And then Satyavan shall glide into the past, a gentle memory pushed away from thee by new love, and thy children's tender hands. You'll have children with the new person, and once you have children, then the equation changes, right? Changes how much? Changes how much? Till thou shalt wonder if thou lovest at all. Such is the life earth's travail has conceived, a constant stream that is never the same. Says this is the life earth has conceived. This is what you have. And what is it? A constant stream that is never the same. But Savitri replied to mighty death, O dark, ironic critique of God's work, thou mockest the mind and body's faltering search for what the heart holds in a prophet hour, and the immortal spirit shall make its own. Mine is a heart that worshipped, though forsaken, the image of the God its love adored. I have burned in flame to travel in his steps. Are we not they who bore vast solitude, seated upon the hills alone with God? Look at that glorious imagery. Glorious imagery. Says you're mocking. You're mocking the mind and body's faltering search. For what? Why so? Because for what the heart holds in a prophet hour. Now, this is important. It's not the vagrant heart, right, that jumps from farm to farm. No, not that heart. In a prophet hour, what the heart holds, says the immortal spirit shall make its own. Says, mine is a heart that worshipped, though forsaken, the image of the God its love adored. Right? And those two lines, are we not they who bore vast solitude, seated upon the hills alone with God? Why dost thou vainly strive with me, O death, a mind delivered from all twilight thoughts, to whom secrets of the gods are plain? Says, why are you tangling with me? I'm not a mere mortal, I know the secrets of the gods, right? For now at last I know beyond all doubt the great stars burn with my unceasing fire, and life and death are both its fuel made. Life only was my blind attempt to love. Earth saw my struggle, heaven my victory. All shall be seized, transcendent. They shall kiss, casting their veils before the marriage fire, the eternal bridegroom and eternal bride. The heavens accept our broken flights at last on life's prow that breaks the waves of time. No signal light of hope has gleamed in vain. Says, I know my purpose, right? Casting their veils, the eternal bridegroom and the eternal bride, they will kiss, right? On life's prow, that breaks the waves of time. No signal light of hope has gleamed in vain. And once she says that, once she says that, there's something happening. This is the transition that I was hinting at in a couple of sessions back, where I wanted you guys to sort of sort of feel through this. Right, again, slightly long passage. I'll see how much I can cover, because there's one more section that I want to go to, but I'll just read out the beginning. Right, no signal light of hope has gleamed in vain. She spoke. The boundless members of the god, as if by secret ecstasy assailed, shuddered in silence as obscurely stir ocean's dim fields delivered to the moon, then lifted up as by a sudden wind around her in that vague and glimmering world where twilight trembled like a bursting veil. Something is happening, something is beginning to stir, right? there are things that are happening, right? And Sri Aurobindo is sort of describing what is happening, right? So I'll leave that section and one second. So here there's another beautiful transition, right? Now remember, something is stirring, something is, changing around Savitri, uh, uh, and she's sort of, this section there around 15-20 lines, Sri Aurobindo will describe how in that state she's going into meditation. She's already at a certain poise of night, right? It's in the fields of night, but she's sort of getting into a meditation. She's sort of bringing her being back, concentrated, and sort of going in, right? And when that happens, all still compelled went gliding on unchanged. Still was the order of these worlds reversed. The mortal led, the god in spirit obeyed. And she behind was leader of their march, and they in front were followers of her will. Glorious transition. Remember the sequence. First is Satyavan, the luminous form of Satyavan that's sort of walking ahead. Then it's death, and then it's Savitri who's following, right? But this change that happened once she has gotten into that meditative poise, she has revealed who she is. All of those events have happened, and suddenly, and that's what Sri Aurobindo was describing. Still was the order of these worlds reversed. Everything changed. What changed? The mortal led, the god in spirit obeyed. And she, behind, was leader of their march, and they, in front, were followers of our will. Look at that transition, the way he's describing it, right? So, again, they keep going. So, I'll move one more section. Sorry, guys. I mean, there's lots to cover because if I don't do this now, then even next week it'll keep extending, right? We can't get to the Traveler of the Worlds, those chapters. So I'll just go to this section.
How was your throat, Mahesh? You've gone on for an hour and 45 minutes.
Yeah, I'll just have some water.
Sure. Yeah.
One moment.
Sure. But it's glorious, glorious poetry, glorious flow.
It's poetry,
Yeah.
and the arguments are all very very intense, right?
Absolutely.
So I'm back. So now here's uh, so I'm going to read out uh, the I'm going to Canto 4 right now. Same book, the Book of the Double Twilight, Canto 4, The Dream Twilight of the Earthly Real. That's the name of the canto. Now we're going to enter this towards the end of a conversation of death. So I'll just read out the end, okay? This truth I know that Satyavan is dead, and even thy sweetness cannot lure him back. No magic truth can bring the dead to life. No power of earth cancel the thing once done. No joy of the heart can last surviving death. No bliss persuade the past to live again. But life alone can solace the mute void and fill with thought the emptiness of time. Leave then thy dead, O Savitri, and live. The woman answered to the mighty shade, and as she spoke, mortality disappeared. Her goddess, capital G, her goddess self grew visible in her eyes. Light came, a dream of heaven into her face. Now, this is the transition that I want to describe. Of course, you have to read the whole thing to get the full impact, right? But the goddess who was within her. So all along, death will say, if you are a form of that mighty mother, show it to me so that even I can worship. Now, again, that portion I couldn't get to, or rather, not enough time, because that's a beautiful place because it expresses a certain truth that though death is a typal god, he sees himself as the creator, yet he has the sense that there's someone higher. He has the sense. He knows that there's someone higher, and he addresses her as the mighty mother. Okay. Now, how do I put it? In one of the Upanishads, you remember, the Yaksha who comes and all the gods are trying to figure out after they have won a battle with the Rakshasas, Asuras, they're trying to figure out who the Yaksha is. And Agni goes, Varuna, Vayu, and they go, and then Indra goes, and the Yaksha is disappearing for everybody. I mean, the Yaksha is defeated by everybody. But when Indra goes, the Yaksha disappears, right? The Yaksha disappears. But Indra has the better sense to stay there, in a poise of aspiration. And then it's the mother, Uma, who comes down, right? And who reveals to Indra that that is the Brahman. The Yaksha was the Brahman, It's that, it's that similar uh, work that's happening here, right? When that says, if that's the mother, revealed, right? And that's the transition that are happening. The woman answered to the mighty shade, and as she spoke, mortality disappeared. Her goddess self grew visible in her eyes. Light came, a dream of heaven into her face. For those of you who have sort of had these experiences, you'll know this, right? Once the inner thing surges, of course, this is at a completely different level altogether. But even at the lower levels, your face takes on an aspect of peace. You're calm, immovable, right? You know what you feel it, right? So it's that multiplied a trillion times, perhaps, right? So that comes over her, and look at the way she's addressing death right now, right? O death, thou too art God, and yet not he, but only his own black shadow on his path. As leading the night, he takes the upward way, and drags with him its clinging inconscient force. Of God unconscious thou art the dark head, of his ignorance thou art the impenitent sign, of its vast tenebrous womb the natural child, on his immortality the sinister bar. So the Supreme Mother is saying, you are also God, but yet you are not Him. Yet not He, not that one divine, but only His black shadow on the path, right? Of God, unconscious, thou art the dark head. Of His ignorance, thou art the sign. You are the one. Of its vast tenebrous womb, the natural child. The dark womb from which everything came, right? You are from there. On His immortality, the sinister bar. All contraries are aspects of God's face. The many are the innumerable one. The many and the one are capital. The one carries the multitude in his breast. He is the impersonal, inscrutable soul. He is the one infinite person seeing his world. The silence bears the eternal's great dumb seal. His light inspires the eternal word. He is the immobile's deep and deathless hush. Its white and signless blank, negating calm. It stands the Creator Self, the Almighty Lord, and watches His will done by the forms of the gods. And the desire that goads half conscious man, and the reluctant and unseeing night. These wide divine extremes, these inverse powers, are the right and left side of the body of God. Existence, balanced twixt two mighty arms, confronts the mind with unsolved abysms of thought. Darkness below, a fathomless light above, in light are joined, but sundered by severing mind, stand face to face, opposite, inseparable, two contraries needed for his great world task, two poles whose currents wake the immense world force. Now, again, for those of you who are familiar with Sri Aurobindo's taxonomy, this uh, is I mean, that Savitri, daughter of the sun, but the mother poise that she's speaking from, this poise is of Aditi, who exceeds the overmind plane. She's the mother of the gods. So you are there at the border of the what do you say? You have exceeded the overmind goddess, you overmind borders. You have exceeded the planes of the gods, and you're standing on the borders of the supermind. Right? It's that mother. Why so? Because it's only the supermind that can harmonize all these contraries. It can see, it has this particular perspective of not seeing these polarities, not seeing these divisions, and knowing where they are united, and what role each plays is a distinct trait of the supermind. So you can make this distinction, right? Whenever you look at any spiritual system, and there's like a little test that you could try, right? Whenever you look at any spiritual system, see if its principles are all about, do this, do that, don't do this, don't do that, eat this, eat that, how you have to dress, what mark you have to wear. Now you'll find that most of these are physical, vital, inspiration is coming from those planes, maybe touched by something higher, but that's it, right? That's it. There's nothing much. The moment you move to something a little higher, it might seem very virtuous, but it will be, slightly deviated, right? Saying, absolute ahimsa. Don't kill anything, don't do anything, etc. And when you put it in the tangle of the world, you get slaughtered, right? So you find that though it is a virtue, it's a virtue that's useless in the world condition. So that is this sort of coming from a idealized sort of mental vital plane, but that's all it is. So you can easily catch the moment someone can reconcile both of these and say that each has its place, and this is the reason it has its place. You understand that something of the supermind is sort of touching it. So whenever you look at most thought systems, right? You want to read the philosophers, the big boys, girls, whoever. There's a nice little test to make, saying, is he playing within the framework? Is he trying to break the framework, or has he exceeded everything? You can catch all of these things if you have this little perspective in mind, and that's what Savitri is doing. She's saying uh, uh, darkness below, a fathomless light above, in light are joined, right? But sundered by severing mind, stand face to face, opposite, inseparable. He says it's the mind which is the culprit. It's the one that is breaking things up. Because why? Because the mind is the reasoner. It is equipped to see only division. It has to break things to understand. That's the nature of the mind, and that we covered in one of our earlier sessions, right? So she says two contraries needed for this great world task, two poles whose currents wake the immense world force. In the stupendous secrecy of his self, above the world, brooding with equal wings, he is both in one beginningless. He's both in one beginningless without end. Transcending both, he enters the absolute. His being is a mystery beyond mind. His ways bewilder mortal ignorance. The finite, in its little sections part, amazed, credits not God's audacity, who dares to be the unimagined all, and see and act as might one infinite. Against human reason, this is his offense, being known to be forever unknowable, to be all and yet transcend the mystic whole, absolute, to lodge in a relative world of time, eternal and all knowing, to suffer birth, omnipotent, to sport with chance and fate, spirit, yet to be matter and the void, illimitable, beyond form and name, to dwell within a body, one and supreme, to be animal and human and divine. And look at look at the beauty with which Aravinda is sort of saying this, right? Because he says the All Mother is saying the All Mother is saying his being, that is the divine's being, is a mystery beyond mind. Says his ways bewilder mortal ignorance, right? Says and look at the way Shiravinda is saying, right? The finite, that is us, in its little section sparked, amazed, credits not God's audacity, who dares to be the unimagined all. He says he's everything that you have not even imagined it. Forget existing. Even that is him, right? Even that is him. And look at this entire series of argument, right? Which is see who dares to be the unimagined all and see and act as might one infinite. Says he's infinite. He can do whatever the hell he wants, right? Against human reason, this is his offense. Being known to be forever unknowable. It is, it offends the reason of man. It's very rude, right? Because why so? Because he's known to be unknowable. You cannot know him, right? To be all and yet transcend the mystic whole. Absolute. He's the absolute, but yet to lodge in a relative world of time. Eternal and all knowing. He doesn't have birth, yet he suffers birth. Omnipotent, still he is playing with chance and fate. Spirit, yet he is consented to be the matter and the void. Illimitable. You can't put a limit on him, but still he agrees to take a form and a name, to dwell within a body, one and supreme, to be animal and human and divine. He says, what sort of a being is this? This is sort of, he says that's where, man's reason cannot sort of reconcile this, right? So I'll skip a few more pages because this is the transition that I wanted to, again, it's a glorious, glorious sequence. I'll just go to Okay. So we are in the same canto, the dream twilight of the earthly real, canto 4. I'm going, I've skipped some 4 5 pages easily. I'm on page 663, and so Savitri Savitri closes one of her arguments with this. Now I'll just read out a portion of that argument. O death, if thou couldst touch the truth supreme, thou wouldst grow suddenly wise and cease to be. If our souls could see and love and clasp God's truth, its infinite radiance would seize our hearts, our being in God's image be remade, and earthly life become the life divine. So she's sort of making one of our closing arguments, right? Then death, the last time, answered Savitri. If truth supreme transcends her shadow here, severed by knowledge and the climbing vasts, what bridge can cross the gulf that she has left between her and the dream world she has made? Says even if you get that, if it makes a change, says who? Because you're Savitri, you can sort of follow this trace and go, right? So, or who could hope to bring her down to men and persuade to tread the harsh globe with wounded feet, leaving her unapproachable glory and bliss, wasting her splendor on pale earthly air? Is thine that strength, O beauty of mortal limbs, O soul who flutterest to escape my net? Who then art thou, hiding in human guise? Thy voice carries the sound of infinity. Knowledge is with thee. Truth speaks through thy words. The light of things beyond shines in thy eyes. But where is thy strength to conquer time and death? Hast thou God's force to build heaven's values here? For truth and knowledge are an idle gleam if knowledge brings not power to change the world, if might comes not to give to truth her right. A blind force, not truth, has made this ignorant world. A blind force, not truth, orders the lives of men. By power, not light, the great gods rule the world. Power is the arm of God, the seal of fate. O human claimant to immortality, reveal thy power, lay bare thy spirit's force. Then will I give back to thee, Satyavan. Or if the mighty mother is with thee, show me her face that I may worship her. Let deathless eyes look into the eyes of death, an imperishable force, touching brute things, transform earth's death into immortal life. Then can thy dead return to thee and live. The prostrate earth perhaps shall lift her gaze and feel near her the secret body of God, and love and joy overtake fleeing time. So, yeah, so he says, you see, knowledge is not enough, and that's the argument that he's making. But where is the strength to conquer time and death? He says, who are you? He says, first of all, he says, your light, something is changing about you. Your eyes are glowing in a weird fashion. There's something else happening. He says, who are you hiding in a human body? He says, but where is the strength to conquer time and death? He says, do you have the force of God to build heaven's values here? Right? He says, but truth and knowledge are only idle gleams. Why so? If knowledge brings not power to change the world, if might, with a capital M, comes not to give truth her right, he says, a blind force, not truth, has made this ignorant world and it is ruling the lives of men. Right? He says, power is the arm of God, the seal of fate. He says, if you have the power, if you have, then show it to me. Or if you have the support of the mighty mother, if that all mother, he says, then show me your face. And look at the way he beautifully says, let deathless eyes look into the eyes of death. See, and this is a beautiful transition, right? Important point to remember uh, important point to remember. If you read the section where Narada is descending from heaven to meet Savitri's mother, remember in one of the very first sessions that early sessions that we read, when Narada is descending, Sri Aurobindo would say that Narada was singing about the glories of Vishnu. Okay, he's singing about the glory of Vishnu and the glory of love, immortal love, Vishnu's love. And he says, as he's coming through the plains, there would be Ashuras that hear the good news. He says, it seems the Ashuras wept for joy. Guess why you wept? The Ashuras wept because their horrible, terrible task of having to bear the crudeness of the world would come to an end once Vishnu comes down. Beautiful transition, right? And that's what is happening here. deathless eyes, that is the mighty mother's eyes, look into the eyes of death. An imperishable force touching brute things transform Earth's death into immortal life. So death is showing its aspiration. It says, if the mighty mother is with you, reveal her to me so that even I can worship her. Right? It's just like the way the Asuras were, weeping, right, out of joy when they heard Narada's song. It's a similar action happening here. And love and joy overtake fleeing time. And Savitri looked on death and answered not. Almost it seemed as if in a symbol shape the world's darkness had consented to heaven light, and God needed no more the inconscient scream. A mighty transformation came on her, a halo of the indwelling deity, the immortal's luster that had lit her face and tainted its radiance in her body's house, overflowing, made the air a luminous sea. In a flaming moment of apocalypse, the incarnation thrust aside its veil. A little figure in infinity, yet stood and seemed the eternal's very house, as if the world's center was her very soul, and all white space was but its outer robe, a curve of the calm, hot year of far heaven, descending into earth's humility. Her forehead span vaulted the omniscient's gaze, her eyes were two stars that watched the power that from her being summit reigned, the presence chambered in lotus secrecy, came down and held the center in her brow, where the mind's lord in his control room sits. There, throned on concentration's native seat, he opens that third mysterious eye in man, the unseen's eye that looks at the unseen, when light with golden ecstasy fills his brain, and the eternal's wisdom drives his choice, and eternal will seizes the mortal will. It stirred in the lotus of her throat of song, and in her speech throbbed the immortal word. Her life sounded with the steps of the world soul, moving in harmony with the cosmic thought. As glides God's Son into the mystic cave, where hides his light from the pursuing gods, it glided into the lotus of her heart and woke in it the force that alters fate. It poured into her navel's lotus depth, lodged in the little life nature's narrow home. On the body's longings grew heaven rapture's flower, and made desire a pure celestial flame, broke into the cave where coiled world energy sleeps, and smote the thousand hooded serpent force that blazing towered and clasped the world self above, joined matter's dumbness to the spirit's hush, and filled earth's acts with the spirit's silent power. Thus changed, she waited for the word to speak. Eternity looked into the eyes of death, and darkness saw God's living reality. Then a voice was heard that seemed the stillness self. That's the vision. That's the vision. The vision of the world mother. And Chairman was describing that entire process, everything. Basically, he described, how each level of the chakra is sort of opening up. The Kundalini has gone and merged with the world self. It's sort of held on. And then he's describing the subsequent sort of sequence, right? Where the world mother, the almighty mother, look at the way, I'll just read a couple of lines and then we'll, perhaps continue next week. Uh, uh, I hail thee, almighty and victorious breath, thou grandiose darkness of the infinite, O void that makest room for all to be, hunger that gnawest at the universe, consuming the cold remnants of the suns, and eatest the whole world with thy jaws of fire. Waster of the energy that has made the stars, inconscience, carrier of the seeds of thought, nescience in which all knowledge sleeps entombed and slowly emerges in its hollow breast, wearing the mind's mask of bright ignorance. Thou art my shadow and my instrument. I have given thee thy awful shape of dread, and thy sharp sword of terror and grief and pain, to force the soul of man to struggle for light on the brevity of his half conscious days. Thou art his spur to greatness in his works, the whip to his yearning for eternal bliss, his poignant need of immortality. Live, death, a while. Be still my instrument. One day, man too shall know thy fathomless heart of silence and the brooding peace of night, and grave obedience to eternal law, and the calm, inflexible pity in thy gaze. But now, O timeless mightiness, stand aside and leave the path of my incarnate force. Relieve the radiant God from thy black mask. Release the soul of the world called Satyavan, freed from thy clutch of pain and ignorance, that he may stand master of life and fate, man's representative in the house of God, the mate of wisdom and the spouse of light, the eternal bridegroom of the eternal bride. So, I mean, that conversation still goes on, but I think I'll sort of stop here. Um, or should I just yeah, I think she stops there, so I think I'll just stop here. So that was the All Mother, and look at the way she's sort of look at that poise of Aditi, right? She's saying, "I hail thee, Almighty and victorious death." Right? Since you're the hunger, but you are also the one that is making space for all of these things. Thou art my shadow and my instrument. I have given thee thy awful shape of dread and thy sharp sword of terror and grief and pain to force the soul of man to struggle for light on the brevity of his half-conscious days. Says you are a spur to greatness in his works, the whip to his yearning for eternal bliss. Right? And so she says, be for a little more time. And this is a beautiful, right? Live death a while, be still my instrument. One day, man too shall know thy fathomless heart of silence and the brooding peace of night. Says, there is a greatness in you, there's a truth in you. One day, man will know you. He will learn not to fear and shun you and run away from you and all of that. He says, he'll know your purpose. One day, he'll know. But he says, until then, right? Until then, he says, step aside, don't stop my incarnation. Don't stop Savitri. So he said, release that fellow. That's what she's saying. Why so? Because the mate of wisdom and the spouse of light, the eternal bridegroom of the eternal bride. And Savitri made that point. She makes that point a little earlier, right? She says, we are the two people who have come. We are the title spirits, right? And we incarnate from age to age. We've been coming again and again. So the All Mother is saying, the time is coming, I've put the plan in place where your work is going to be finished. But for now, step aside, just move. And look at how casually the All Mother, right? Started saying, right? Move aside because that's the eternal bridegroom, eternal bride. Don't stop him because he's the soul of the world. You can't hold him back, right? So then, it then the section goes on, but I think I'll stop here for now. Uh, Thanks, guys, for listening.
Wow. Thank you so much, Mahesh. You went on for 2 straight hours. What a flow. Um,
Master
yeah.
has written lots more. Can't cover. We have to do something like this. Otherwise, can't cover
No,
refraction.
I know, but this is, kind of so deeply, deeply, deeply stirring, moving. I can't even describe that, especially that whole visualization of that Kundalini rising.
Absolutely, absolutely,
Amazing. Just
absolutely. And that's where, right? I mean, if you look at, like I always say, I've already told this 5, 6 times, I think, in each one of our sessions. Uh, uh, Master is a chronicler of of the glories of the world, right? Chronicler, especially the yogic phenomena, right? Chronicled,
Mhm.
captured in such accurate detail that he once you have that experience, that's when you realize, this is what it is, this is how it's happening. And I
Mm.
think if there is any trait we pick up at all, is to uh, now, you see, the philosophical wrangling is one thing, right? But to share the spiritual phenomena that have occurred so that, it acts as a guidepost to someone else. And to also emphasize the fact that it's experience that matters, not mental wrangling. From that perspective, right? The precision with which you ought to recount your experience or even receive it, and the discrimination and the spiritual intuition that you ought to employ when you're looking at these things, if it becomes a little more popular, it's going to help all of us enormously, actually.
Absolutely, and I think it's also about how to read this. I mean, this cannot be read with mind. It has to be read with heart.
Oh, yes.
I
Yes,
mean,
yes, yes.
in the beginning of today's session, some of the things that were covered. I mean, quantum physics tries to get to it with such complex mathematics, unnecessarily made complex because it has to kind of cater to the mind readers, or rather readers of from the mind, not mind
Yeah,
readers,
yeah,
readers
yeah, yeah,
from the
yeah.
mind. But this one, it just goes straight to the heart, and such makes such elegant sense, picturing together how it all began, what is matter, what is spirit, and amazing. Yeah, this needs to kind of become some sort of mainstream reading, in at least in university stage. This is for the humanity as a whole,
Absolutely.
not particularly.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you so much, Mahesh.
Welcome, Hemant.
It's
My privilege.
brilliant, brilliant, brilliant session today. So at this point, I open for people to raise hands and come up to the speakers panel, and if you have any reflections, questions, etc. Rachna ji, would you like to say something?
No, I just, I don't know, I can just only thank you two for introducing me to this, and there's no way I could have done this reading on my own. So thank you. And I'm still trying to understand and relate it to how I look at things and see where all of this is coming from. But no, I'm not still finding my ground. So I will just shut up.
Rachna ji, it's not as if we have found our ground also. It's just that we, we, we have stumbled a little more than you, perhaps. That's all it is. So,
And there is no finding the ground. There is only immersing.
yeah, yeah.
Immerse deeper and deeper and deeper. That's it. Yeah. Um, right. Once again, anybody else who wants to come up to the speakers panel, please do. Um, so, Mahesh, in terms of uh, planning for future
Yeah.
sessions, I reckon there's probably one more session to cover the remainder, or
No,
would we need few?
no, no. We need one session to cover this transition where, because the boon itself is not, after, because once the All Mother, she just said right now, right? After the sequence, there is another book in which the boon is given in a specific way. And here you will see that Sri Aurobindo has recasted the Savitri epic from, because in the Savitri of Mahabharata, death gives the boon and he's done with it, right? Satyavan is back and then they're all hunky dory, right? That's what happens. But the way Sri Aurobindo has portrayed that material, right? You will see that there is another transition that happens, and this all divine is sort of conferring the boon in a very specific fashion. And Savitri has to prove herself worthy of performing that task. After all this, it has to go through some sequence. And if you look at that sequence, right, I mean, we'll cover it next week. If you look at that sequence, there are some Vedic style affirmations that are happening of the change in poise of consciousness. You know, if you, for example, if you, there is this very famous what do you say, in the Rig Veda, there is the very famous portion where Agastya, I think I've mentioned this, right? Agastya is sort of in a hurry to reach the higher states, and he sort of, his aspiration is sort of shooting through, right? And then Indra stops him. Indra stops him and says, I thought we were friends, I thought we were friends. Why are you exceeding me? Why are you denying me? Now, Indra is Lord of the human mind, right? It's the Lord of the human mind. He says, don't leave me. If you skip my step, my state of consciousness, your discovery is going to be incomplete, right? So he says, don't do that. I thought we were friends, and you will notice that instant transition instant, and
mm,
Agastya will document it. I mean, it's just like what, 12, 13 verses, right? Agastya will document where instantly he's shifting his voice. He says, I
mm,
affirm you, Indra, oh my friend. And then the, whatever subsequently has to happen, right? That happens. And that
mm,
discipline is recorded there. That
mm,
psychological discipline. Now, and you will see a similar thing happening here. A similar, very
mm.
similar thing. And of course, at Sri Aurobindo's level of detail, right? He will document that inflection in the poise, right? At every poise, he'll affirm and boom, next step and next step. It'll keep happening. So that comes in the next book, right? So we'll just briefly
Yeah.
touch upon that because it's very relevant. Because a lot of these Sri Aurobindo types from the ashram, they keep making this assertion that oh, Sri Aurobindo's integral yoga is has got nothing to do with Hinduism. He didn't want to create a religion. This, that, there are lots of very famous people who prattle on about this, right? But you will see these typal aspirations that are recorded in the Veda being affirmed by Sri Aurobindo,
Mm,
right? By Sri Aurobindo. And if you can sort of, build a map of or a timeline of consciousness, and you will see that sort of tremendous surrender recurring in multiple places. So, the Agastya surrender is one thing, to Indra. Then, if you come a little forward in time, relatively speaking, you will see Arjuna's surrender to Sri Krishna.
mm,
Same
mm,
same discipline, same surrender, very similar, right? Now, that's where people always look at Arjuna as a very fighter boy, fighter cock, quick to anger, that sort of fellow, right? They don't understand what sort of a tremendous being he is. That angle is not explored at all. Because to be selected as the friend of Krishna itself is a difficult affair. And on top of
mm,
this, to be chosen, to be given this knowledge, this highest knowledge, secret of secrets, he says. The secret of secrets, I'm giving it to you. And the fellow is in the span of a conversation is able to shift his voice. Look at that.
mm,
Tremendous capacity. He's so
mm,
well trained. Now imagine people listen. I mean, I don't want to blame people, I'll blame myself. I've probably read essays on the Gita 20,000, 20 times, 30 times by now, or perhaps even more. And to practice a fraction of that, it takes a bloody lifetime. 20 years. You're like a
mm,
donkey, dull as a donkey. And there are these chants, Arjuna and Agastya. The thing is said, and boom, the voice is shifting. So yeah, we'll cover that, and then comes the traveler of the worlds. So that I do not know. Maybe for 3 4 weeks that would go on. Traveler of the worlds is the experience of Sri Aurobindo sadhana itself, right? So it's
mm,
those sections. So I think we'll have one more of this uh, section with death. Death is done for. Our boy must step aside because the All Mother has said, give me back my golden-eyed boy. I have work to be done with
mm,
him. So we'll just cover that transition because I want you guys to see that, Vedic style affirmation. Because, how do I put it? If you can make that concordance, then it enriches both, as in if you can make that concordance, reading Savitri becomes a training ground for you to read the Veda, and reading the Veda
mm,
becomes a training ground for you to read Savitri. You know,
mm,
so,
mm,
so you can toggle back and forth and derive whatever, your Swabhava is ready for. But over a period of time, a little back and forth between these, right? You'll be able to catch these concordances much more frequently. And yeah, and for sadhana, you know.
mm. Brilliant. This opened a door for me now. So this surrender is there is an evolution of surrender. Every poise surrenders to a higher
Yeah.
poise.
Oh, yes.
So there's no settling. There is no settling until the end is reached.
Absolute. Absolute. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what I like to think of it as the hierarchy of Saranagati, hierarchy of surrender. There's a
Mm,
hierarchy, right? And the hierarchy, and that's where you will find, in South Indian temples, you'll find these, especially the older temples, you will find in front of the deity a carving of a man in a Shashtanga Namaskara, a full prostration, you know,
mm,
with his palms in a Namaskara gesture lifted above the head, and he's completely on the ground, prostrating towards the deity, right?
mm,
Now that is but the most external perception or representation of Saranagati, right? Why so?
mm,
Because though you can bend your body and you can take that posture, your vital might be still rebelling, your mind might be still
mm,
rebelling, your heart might be elsewhere. You've done
mm,
these gestures, yes, but the true Saranagati is where
mm,
all the parts of the being are aligned and they are
mm,
all in surrender. And what do we mean by surrender? And this is where in record of yoga in the earlier chapters, Sri Aurobindo will observe this, right? He'll in the Sapta Chatusthaya, right? In the seven tetrads, the yogic discipline that was given to him by Sri Krishna in the jail. You will find such nuance. What is this nuance? When you say you ought to be unmoved by pleasure and pain, this includes pleasure and pain at all levels. Now, what do I mean by
mm,
all levels? And this is where Sri Aurobindo will practice that, right? In the jail, he says there were warrior ants or these fire ants or whatever that were biting him, and our man withstands it. He withstands the pain.
mm,
Why? Discipline, to be unmoved. Because he does that, and later in record of yoga, he will record a sequence where the bite of the ant, he says that pain, he is at a particular poise where it changes into ananda, it
mm,
changes into bliss, and our man is doing that experience. He's
mm,
practically doing it. No, you see this trait, right? It is so very different from the conventional spiritual thing, right? Where they will cry, moan, oh, Narayana, you have hit me, da 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 da, oh, you're very cruel. Or I don't want to make fun because even that's a harsh, it's a difficult enough endeavor to do. But you look at this
mm,
voice, right? Because he says the divine is saying, stability, being unmoved. Now, unmoved at all levels. It's not just emotion, physically unmoved, mentally unmoved,
mm,
vitally unmoved, emotionally unmoved. To hold everything together in a perfect poise. So,
mm,
Saranagati has layers, right? Okay. At each one of these layers, and that's why I would also recommend that people touch record of yoga by Sri Aurobindo, because the Sapta Chatusthaya, the early chapters, when he gets into details, right, in terms of what is meant by equanimity, what is meant by aspiration, he will record all the nuances,
mm.
and it's a crazy amount of detail, crazy,
Mm.
crazy amount of detail. So, yeah.
Beautiful. Thanks, Mahesh. Shiva, you wanna say something, and then I'll come to you, Summer, Shimmer. You
Yeah,
changed.
okay.
Yes. So on this chapter between, this dialogue between Death and Savitri, what I feel is that it is a glimpse of in the Rig Veda when mother or Aditi there has 8 children, 8 Adityas born out of her. So Adityas, obviously, in the later Brahmanas, it becomes 12, and Ling Purana, it becomes furthermore. But the 8 Adityas are the sons of the Divine Mother there, and the eighth Aditya is called Martanda, and Martanda is the son of the Divine Mother who's lost in the material matter, in the inconscient,
Yeah.
right? And then that has to be risen and saved. So there is something. Basically there's this. The sun is hiding. A certain form of Savitri is hiding inside the darkness of matter, which has to be pulled upwards. Whether you call it the rising of Kundalini, or you can say the supramental sun contacting the supramental sun below matter. So supramental sun is above the head in the higher planes, and the that same sun as Martanda, you can say, is hiding inside matter, and that has to be pulled up for it to be rejuvenated. Also, what I feel is that in the tantric traditions, they call it something which removes the darkness of old age is called Jara Dvantra Viprabha, which means the same sun in the darkness of matter spreads its light, right? So this has a deep meaning in terms of like when you look at the biological cell, how it dies. So the cell produces the mitochondria in the cells. There are 600 to 800 mitochondria in each cell. They produce carbohydrates, fats, and proteins, generate ATP or energy. When you inhibit that ATP or energy, the cells die, and that's how eventually the human being dies, right? So the heart dies because the mitochondria there dies away. So basically, there are certain chemicals in chemistry which are called ATP inhibitors. Basically, the energy of the cells die and death occurs, right? So basically, this tantric tradition of Jaratvantra Viprabha and the Vedic tradition of the Surya inside the matter is indicating this, that science eventually will discover also a certain chemical which will push in sun-like light within the cells, hence death will not occur, right? So one is a top-down approach that the upper sun of Savitri touches the Surya below matter. That's kind of a top-down approach. But what biologists are today approaching, they want to figure out a sun-like chemical inside the mitochondria so that the ATP energy never stops producing energy. So basically the cellular product of our carbohydrates, fats, and proteins is ATP energy. If that goes on, never goes through a dysfunction. So mitochondria, for example, never goes through a dysfunction. It goes on producing energy. So it's like getting the sunlight inside the cells again. So in my understanding today, modern biochemistry is attempting that, finding the Surya at a very biochemical level. So this is the light which I wanted to push also in this way, that there's not only a spiritual method with the top-down approach, the upper consciousness trying to contact the consciousness below matter, but also they're trying to get a chemical invocation of consciousness or sun-like energy also within the human cell. So there is no mitochondrial dysfunction, hence death cannot occur also in that way. So they'll figure out a way somehow, even in biochemistry, where they can first extend the human body life from 80 to 100 years to 120 years, maybe then 150 years. So even biochemistry is trying to do the same immortal approach of the cell through their bottom up approach. So this is something which I wanted to bring into
Wonderful
class.
concordance,
Thank
Shiva.
you.
Wonderful concordance. And the point that you mentioned about the 8 and the 12 sons of Aditi, right? It's a very important concordance. I wouldn't say that I have entirely understood how those concordances actually play out, but I remember Vladimir Yatsenko, associated with the Sri Aurobindo Ashram. Vladimir has in one of his lectures, I don't remember which particular lecture, but you can listen to Vladimir because Vladimir gets it. He gets the complexities of the spiritual journey, as in the integral yoga, and he also, because he knows Sanskrit very very well, he's also familiar with the Rig Veda entirely. So when I say familiar with the Rig Veda, because of secret of the Veda, right? So he gets it. So there are no deviations with Vladimir Yatsenko. He's a guy I could easily recommend, to listen. Just like Shradhalu Ranade, right? Even Shradhalu sort of gets the game very well. But if you want to be on the technical side of things, right, and approach, or rather take whatever help you can, so that you might be able to pursue the Veda on your own, and follow some of its guidelines of aspiration, right? Some of the poises, these are poises that we can learn practice. So you don't need to read the Rig Veda like academic person, wait for a guru or grandfather to come and teach you. No, you don't need to do that. You read secret of the Veda, get the symbolism, or take up a decent translation, of the Rig Veda, then you'll be able to intuit your way through the game, right? So, so it's a beautiful thing what Shiva pointed out. So I highly recommend that you guys go pursue that aspect also independently.
Thank you.
Uh,
Thanks.
yeah, yeah, I just want to add another thing. Himanji, can I speak right now or later,
Yes, yes,
as
yes.
you
Please
would
go
want?
on. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's another important chemical phenomena related to death. So when death occurs, there is a phenomena called proton leakage which happens. So basically, there are protons or positive charges around the cell. So there are certain chemicals in chemistry. When you ingest them, proton leakage happens. The body goes into a process of
Huh.
heat, and eventually your energy production ATP is inhibited, which means your cells cannot produce energy, and death occurs. So the opposite of that process. So this is called the process of death of a cell, and eventually all the cells die. That's how you get white hair. That's how you get wrinkles, stuff like that. Now the opposite process is this. that if the proton leakage does not ever happen, so there are certain chemicals which keeps the protons intact. They in fact build the cellular membrane. The positive charge is meant intact, and that kind of provides the extra energy of ATP. So what I also see is that, like you can say it in a poetical way, that if you want to understand life, you have to understand death. So if you want to understand chemical life of a cell, of an how ATP is produced, then you also must understand chemical death. And the opposite of that is the chemical which gives eternal life even to the body. So the process of proton leakage, when it is done excessively, that causes cellular death and hence death of the ATP energy. But if you ingest the opposite chemical, which creates you can say the proton leakage, it inhibits proton leakage, keeps the proton leakage preserved. Protons or the positive charges are more preserved, and that increases the ATP energy, and then death cannot occur. So I feel that's the future also at a chemical way. So the whole process is locked in something called proton leakage and the stopping of proton leakage essentially. So I wanted to just get the idea of death in a chemical point of view, and how if scientists will achieve an eternity of a cell, which means you never die, it will be in the process that the proton leakage does not occur at all. Throughout your life, it will never occur. So I've been reading this process very deeply to see which chemicals or which portions from Ayurveda, which herbs actually does the it stops the proton leakage, and then ATP energy is produced forever and ever. So I've been studying that through the connection between Ayurveda and the herbs which actually preserves the proton sphere, and that kind of should preserve the life for at least for 120 150 years for coming times now. But later they will achieve maybe even better processor methods to do it in a bottom up approach. So just wanted to get also the biochemistry there for it now. Thank you.
Have you also, are you familiar with Michael Lewin experiment, Shiva?
Yes.
Even that is very interesting in light of what you're saying. How that instruction happens at the electrical body level, which they have been able to actually capture, and how tweaking that can change things at the gross body level as well. So, yeah, sorry, Shima, you want to go
Yeah.
next?
I know you guys can finish your conversation. I have time, no issues. But what you said, Shiva, is so wow. I mean, interesting. And Rachna, what you were talking about, I don't know. I mean, Shiva, do you know what Rachna is speaking about? Or what? That's what she's asking
Yes,
you.
yes. This Levin chap is a famous biologist. He talks about this bioelectrical field. So he's getting there to similar understanding, which I'm speaking about. He's getting there, but what they're not, because they lack spiritual intuition. So if you see, there are two ends to it, right? The top-down approach is for sure that the consciousness from Savitri, from the Surya up there, contacts the consciousness or the Surya locked inside the darkness of matter. That's the top-down approach. What these guys are trying, that if we can touch or play with the biochemistry, you can say the bioelectricity, because you see, biology is dependent on chemistry, but chemistry is dependent on physics, and physics is dependent on mathematics. That's how science is based on. So I'll go with this again. Biology is dependent on chemistry, so that's body's chemistry, but the chemistry is itself dependent on you can say physics, and that's protons and electrons and neutrons and all that stuff. So the cell is primarily a membrane of protons, and there's something also called electron transport chain. So if one can understand how to play with these protons and electrons at a cellular level, then you can just straight away keep the ATP switched on, the energy goes on being produced, so you don't die basically. And behind it is mathematics. So you would have to count that how many protons in a day through which chemical when ingested keeps that membrane intact, hence the cell does not die, hence you do not die. Then eventually the human being dies because there is a cellular death which happens. So like in a TV there are pixels, right? Treat each pixel on a TV like your body cells. So this pixels actually go through a fault. So there is something called mitochondrial dysfunction. There is something called DNA repair. So today, what they are trying to study is how should the mitochondria not function, go through a dysfunction. Which chemical is that? How can we protect this proton sphere around the cell? How can we, how do you say, create DNA repair, a maintenance engine in the cell? So they're figuring this out in a very deep way, and at the heart of it, what I experience is there will be the foundation of what you can say the Surya inside the cell, which in Tantra they capture as Jaradvantra Viprava, which means that Jara means you can say the old age, right? So there is an explosion of the sun energy inside the cell, which they will chemically find by tinkering with bioelectricity, essentially. So the bioelectricity changes of the protons will switch on the Surya inside the cell, by which the cell will not die. So that's what I see is what they're getting to. But because they do not have spiritual intuition, they haven't obviously read the Rig Vedas. The bottom up approach, this is their approach currently. And this is bioelectricity is the beginning of a correct approach for biochemistry, essentially, which this 11 guy is promoting. So I highly recommend his videos. He's the one of the pioneers in bioelectricity in the world currently in cell biology.
May
Right.
I add
So,
something there?
okay, Vinodji, go on.
So basically, now that Michael Levin is very much on the right track, and he kind of is quite. He may not be aware of Vedas and other things, because even if you're aware of Vedas, I don't think you get the kind of details that you are going to get there. At the most, it may lay out a kind of approach, and which is what he's already adopting actually. And he, in fact, he's on record saying that, at a very core, we should not assume that reality is bottom up. Bottom up meaning, the atoms and molecules form the things, and everything is just a kind of it is just meaning that they have, there's a term there's a term for it. I'm forgetting the term. Anyway, so here he is very very clear like that it is the bioelectricity which is controlling a set of cells. See, the problem actually is not in a single cell. Okay, it is like how you control a bunch of cells to to kind of form a organ, for example, and so on. Now every cell doesn't know the reality. It is just a small cell with a totally local kind of information. So who is supposed to manage the higher level information and then make the cell do exactly a particular thing, right? So this information necessarily comes from the higher level, and it is only acting through the mechanism of bioelectricity, which essentially is somewhat like saying that okay, all the cells are connected through a particular ion exchange that you are talking of, proton exchange and all that. And then but then that has to be managed at a higher level, and that management is definitely very high level intelligence, and it is definitely coming from outside the system, and but then because that bioelectricity layer is one can manipulate that. Is actually showing by manipulating that for example, you can have a eye develop on the leg, you can create two heads, for example, and all these kind of changes, as if the body is like a subroutine. Every part of the body is a subroutine, and you kind of call it to kind of make a particular part of the body kind of a thing. It is extremely exciting, and it's actually happening, meaning it is something, it's like lab experiments, right? I mean, they have to be very factual about it. So the bottom up kind of thing is this approach is bringing out the fact that there is a control over everything. Where is that control coming? How it is coming? Of course, they don't have access to that right now. But then it's not very difficult to assume that that the brain is controlling the electric fields ultimately. When you think you are controlling the electric field in different places and so on. So that part of the stack is unknown. The topmost is known, bottom is known, but in between thing is unknown. And this has nothing to do with Arvindo, by the way. I think there is a totally different reality out there as compared to what Sri Aurobindo is telling. So in my this thing, actually things are happening in a very positive manner, in which are kind of filling in all the gaps. That's what I feel. And
Yeah.
simultaneously, he also actually explains how cancer happens. Essentially, cancer means the cells are triggered, they are all producing everything, they are replicating and all that, but the control suddenly is gone. And in fact, what happens, it's not that control is gone. What really happens is from one control there are two controls which arise. So the body as a whole is having one control, and that's why body is working in a very perfect manner. But then the cancer cells get separated, and it's as if a new organism is born in that particular area. Now those set of cells have their own separate electricity, bioelectric field, and then it is as if some higher level force is creating that, so that they start to grow uncontrollably, and that is what cancer is actually. Or it can also be seen as a saying that it's I cannot control some aspect of reality. It's like a big company which cannot control what some office is doing in some totally remote city kind of a thing. So that is another reasoning that they use for this. But everything is like very, very, you people have really need to study it, because in my opinion, it's extremely, uh, a lot of details are coming out exactly how the things are happening. But then all this only if you believe that this reality layer of reality is real. I normally say that this whole thing is also like a dream. So you can't really say that that thing is real or unreal because in dream anything and everything works.
Uh, I'd like to add one particular point from a spiritual mechanics perspective, right? So, then if you took a spiritual view of this change of the body, the perfecting of the body, or crafting of the divine body, to use that sort of a language. You find in the agenda that the mother is speaking of completely different dynamics. The physiology of the body, the cells have been transformed. The physiology of the body itself seems to have undergone some sort of a change, to make the supramental being whose material is of a is of a suppler material than the flesh that we have, so that the consciousness sort of can impose its will on the body, and it can be more pliable and supple and whatnot. This is one aspect. The other aspect, if you look at the Veda, because the Vedic guys have sort of attacked this problem. So they will speak of the Ashwin twins, the divine physicians, who come to fix the body, right? So there is that angle also that ought to be explored by us sadhaks, because that's another route, right, where you are not the what do you say, the scientist, the biochemical scientist. You don't want to depend on all of these fellows. So you have another route possible where the body can be fixed. In fact, Mother records a particular instance where one of the disciples, he had some illness in his body, and to fix his body, the guy has an experience. He sees in his meditation, our man has come out of meditation, and he sees these two glowing beings standing, and our man freaks out. The disciple, he freaks out. He's not able to handle that shock. So he comes and tells the mother, saying, "Mother, this happened, and there were these two gods who had sort of come, godlike beings." And mother says, they were the Ashwin twins. I had sent them to fix your body, right? To fix your illness, right? So there is that other angle also. So like Sir was saying, the material science, it goes in its own, and even Shiva was pointing to, right, alluding to, material science goes from a bottom-up sort of perspective, matter as the starting point, and matter's combination permutations as the way to discover the key that would unlock the door to immortality. But there's another route to immortality, the Vedic route, which is Ashwins come in, they divinize the body, they make it fit to receive the higher force, and the higher force descends again, and it does its magic, right? And that's from there you go from a dark, thin Bengali chap to the Sri Aurobindo of the later form. That's the magic that's happened right there. The evidence is right in front of your eyes, right? Now, so you don't have to sort of ignore the fact that he did leave the body, apparently died, right? So he left the body, etc. But look at all the stuff that's happened before that. His physical sheet has changed. His physical sheet, physically he has changed. The color has changed. Everything has changed. So there is that possibility, the transformation of the material body to become more subtle, more stronger, more divinized, longevity, live for as long as you want type affair is a sort of discovered thing in the yogic path, but not practiced enough. Not practiced enough because people are happy with bhajans and a little few lectures on Vedanta, and they are happy. But if you got down to the the yoga as it is practiced by the big boys and girls, right? You realize that much more is possible. But we have this, many taboos attached where we are not even willing to cross the lower levels, which sort of seems to be holding us back. And so, just so that you guys understand, that this is not just hearsay or me being a fanboy to Sri Aurobindo or Integral Yoga. Master gives me no commission basically from all his revenue. But I must say this, right? Even in the early stages, you realize that your bodily sheath is being touched, tweaked, transformed in so many places. The things you notice, which is the change in your swabhava, your personality, right? You began with a certain set of skills, attributes, dispositions, and so on, and you find them changing. Things that would take a couple of decades, perhaps, are just gone overnight. Overnight, just aspiration. It's just going up. That's one. But you will also feel this in your subtle body. When I say subtle body, and this experience I've had many, many, many times, where you feel another body coming out of your body in the conscious waking state. I'm not talking about dream experiences, right? Wide awake in the middle of, all the stress and bustle of life. Uh, I've had those experiences. They come. There's somewhere this divine force, Shakti, she's capable of all of these changes. Whether she wants you to stick around for 100 years plus or whatnot, it's left to her purpose, right? But but you don't have to. I mean, science is one way of looking at it, but you don't have to wait. All of these things are open, and it's open to everybody. And when I say everybody, I literally mean everybody. If you aspire, it'll come. The experience will come. And all the whatever they are mucking around with chemicals, you can just sit there in your room, get into a little meditation session, and these fields of experience are open. Now, whether the body itself is going to be changed, are you going to be supramentalized, will you be transformed, will you end up looking like Sri Aurobindo? It's all left to his purpose, and what he has assigned to you as the syllabus that you have to finish in this lifetime, that's left to him. But it's there, it's open, and you don't have to wait. You don't need anybody. You keep Savitri, you keep Sri Aurobindo's books, you go battle with him. He'll give you all of these experiences. So, yeah.
One thing I would like to point out, though, is that you stating that you don't get any commission was a lie. Is the poise you reach to speak so fluently about Savitri and transform that into experience? That's the commission you get. So
No, it's I like to crib with master, right? Somewhere it's my strategy of getting him to be a little more, for my path to Sarvavyapi Darshana, right? I want to see him all the time, everywhere. So my path is to make him feel guilty, then he'll feel guilty saying, "Poor child, I've bashed him too much, I need to be a little more graceful to him." So far it hasn't worked, but I told you, right? I'm a little.
right. Shimmer, Thandi Hawa Ka Jhokka.
Yes. Thank you so much. So I'm going to change the whiff of direction because I'm Thandi Hawa Ka Jhoka. So poof, the change, okay. The change in the sense that I'm going to ask something which is not probably what you guys were speaking about right now. So I want to talk about Sharanagati. Okay, so which you were explaining right now, Kalisji, that what a poise that Arjuna. I mean, first of all, to be a friend of Krishna. See, who got the privilege of being a friend of Krishna? Arjuna, who was there in the battle and whose battle was approved by Krishna, explaining him. I mean, see, Arjuna was right in the battlefield wanting to fight the war, but out of his own fear or other doubts, he was not able to take that step. That's when Bhagavad Gita occurs to Arjuna from Krishna, and then again the battle is continued. Okay, so I don't see a change of any direction taking place there, in the sense that it's not like Arjuna was doing something which then he was not supposed to do. Bhagavad Gita occurs very much to push ahead the same agenda with which Arjuna was there on the battlefield, which proves that Arjuna was, should I say, the deserving candidate for Bhagavad Gita, for befriending, because he was friends with Krishna in the first place, proves itself that Arjuna was so poised and so complete in his, being as a disciple or maybe whatever. So the reason I'm asking this here, or my question out here is, uh, there are two questions. My question has two parts. Okay, the first part is that what Sharnagati did to Arjuna in the middle of the battlefield, where he could absorb the Gita, he could receive the Gita, Bhagavad Gita, and continue his wholesome being, his wholesomeness, doing his act in his, what he intended to do. He was able to do it then because he was able to also give Sharnagati, right, to Krishna, and therefore receive the Bhagavad Gita. So, my first question is, in surrender to these forces lies the key, is it? So if somebody surrenders to Savitri, is that what it requires, the surrender to Savitri with the right attitude, what the way Arjuna had towards Bhagavad Gita, towards Krishna? Is that kind of surrender to Savitri which brings about the experience of it? Is first part of the question. So if you just tell me that, then I'll ask the second part.
Yeah. So uh, I would say yes and no. The short answer is yes and no. Yes, that's the sort of poise you need. But then again, remember, it's Sri Aurobindo is how do I put it? Just like Krishna, you find that he has not crafted this enormous temple, right? He has not crafted this enormous temple of Savitri so that only people who can ascend its thousand stairs can sort of reach the deity. No, right? He's placed doors everywhere. At every step there is a door. So I would frankly say it doesn't matter how you approach it. You don't need to be surrendered. But all I would recommend, because it's the sort of thing that worked for me perhaps, is the attitude of a child. Always have the attitude of a child, as in a child who doesn't know, who's sort of reaching out to its mother for light and love and joy. You reach out like that, just tell within yourself, I'm the dumbest creature on existence. I don't have a bloody clue how to read poetry. I do not know, yet, oh mother, cast your glance on me, please. That's it, right? And then if you can add other poises to it, all the more better. The poise of the lover who's looking at his beloved, the divine beloved, right? Read it with that passion. Just like the way perhaps a young warrior would treat the body of his woman, he would basically worship her, right? It's the same thing, or vice versa. The maiden looking at the body of our hero, right? You would worship every toenail, every hair, every wrinkle, everything is dear to you. Approach Savitri like that if you can, right? Or if you want to be the sage, you're going to look at the grammar and semantics and what other poetry it alludes to. You want to get all technical about his poetry, do that too. It doesn't matter. See what works for you. That's what I would recommend. So Sharanagati is not just about, and here's another aspect, right? Sharanagati is not just the traditional forms of surrender as we understand it. Sharanagati is also obedience to his word. When he says go slay, you have to go slay. Ask yourself whether you're ready for that, right? And if you have done it, if you're close to it, you have attempted it, you failed 10 times, but 11th time, you are again going to try. Sharanagati is all of these things. Sharanagati is never giving up. So we have this, unfortunately, this very old-fashioned notion that Sharanagati is just lying there and he'll pick you up and sing for you and whatnot, right? That's one aspect, for some swabhavas that could work. But Charanagati is also that repeated attempt to perfect yourself, to perfect your poise. And how do you know the poise is perfected? Because when you do that gesture, when you do that gesture, whatever gesture it is, right? When you do that gesture, do you feel that connect? Is the contact established? That's the benchmark. If it has not come, then it's not perfect, right? So as long as you bear that in mind, so you try the child's poise, you try the poise of the lover, you try the poise of the sage, as you're approaching Savitri, doesn't matter. See where the connection is made. Now, that said, our resistance, our ignorance is so thick that often things are not slain in one go, in one reading. You need repeated attempts, and many times you would not understand whether anything is changing in you at all. But if you're careful, you can perceive because the reluctance in you, the hesitation in you, the cluelessness in you, all of that would be, chipped out little by little, chipped out, you know, chipped out. And the moment there is a breach, a small little breach, even a little crevice, right? A little crevice, you will find its light pouring through, and that's your anchor moment, right? That's when you know that, okay, I got to it. So all that I've done somewhere is like a formula, all the repeated attempts I did, the effort I took, all of that I need to double up, until, another intuition comes and tells you certain things are not necessary or certain things are necessary and so on. So that's how I see surrender, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, wow, thank you. I from this first answer, I have one lovely takeaway which I was blindsided to, though it had probably occurred to me in a passing way, but it's going to stay with me now forever. Where you mentioned that sentence that, that sentence which you mentioned, that when he says slay, you have to then go and slay. Are you ready for that? That level. Oh, that level of Sharnagati, and Sharnagati's essential meaning, like in so many different ways. Thank you for putting a light on that aspect. uh, so I get to
Welcome.
get my
Yes.
answer here.
Yeah.
My second question is, uh, can now I don't it could be vice versa, so I'll just name one book before the other.
Hmm.
Is Bhagavad Gita, can Bhagavad Gita deliver is Savitri capable of delivering to a seeker what Bhagavad Gita is known to deliver to people? Are they both equal in their, force? Is what I want to know.
Now, if I answer this question, you are going to get me tulped by both Sri Krishna on one side and Sri Aurobindo on the other. Okay. Getting beatings from one itself is hard enough. No, you want to ask this question. But anyway, that is on this note. No, see, the thing is, the Gita as is not a easy discipline to do. The Gita's discipline. So people, when they speak about reading the Gita, reading does absolutely nothing. Chanting the Gita does absolutely nothing. Absolute zero spiritual benefit. If at all anything, it improves your memory. That's it. Right? And maybe a little knowledge of Sanskrit. It does nothing. Right? What does work is if you perform, if you do the discipline of the Gita, do all that Sri Krishna is asking you to do, right? Everything step by step and in all its details. Now, why do I say all its details? Because the difficulty of the Gita's discipline is in its application in the real world, and you will find most people taking the easy route of bhakti, not karma, not even karma, because karma yoga is so hard to do. It's so hard to do right. He's asking you to do Nitya Smarana constantly. When you're delivering a presentation, how will you remember Sri Krishna? Right? Your mind concentration is broken. But there is a way to do it because Sri Krishna is alluding to a possibility where there is a separation created in the being, where the outer portion is working and the inner is doing contemplation. There is that portion available, but you have to discover it. Someone has to teach you how to do it. And unless a guru tells it to you, you won't even know. Or a person who has gone on that path, you won't even know. Now, by that measure, you will find that the Gita is a highly aphoristic book. It's like a secret message. Krishna is saying one thing, and Arjuna is understanding, 10 different variations of it. And that's the reason, if you look at his counter questions, they are not like simple questions. So he has already made the leap in his head. Now, for anyone who wants to practice the Gita, they'll have to go through the same cycle. You have to go through the same cycle. You have to get the same experiences. Only then you know that the Gita has worked in you. The Gita's realization you have attained. Okay, number one. Now, when I say Gita's realization you have attained, I mean everything. Now, what do I mean by everything? You have to the universal vision of the time spirit that has to come. That has to come. That is when the realization of the Gita you have truly attained. Now, ask yourself, even after all the things that you have read, how many have attempted it? Forget gaining anything. How many attempted? Handful? That's it. That's it. Or they get some temporary realization, one of the human states, and they stop there. People just stop there, right? And they'll end up writing books and books and books. Now, if you ask, does Savitri pose the same level of difficulty? My honest answer would be no, no, because Savitri is sort of taking it at a much more leisurely pace. Master is giving you details. Now, not to say that Savitri is any easier, because if you actually want to talk about it from a realization state, right? Have I attained this? Two lines of that will, if you can capture in a lifetime, if you can attain in a lifetime, it's very, very great. So from that perspective, I would say, it's not any less difficult than the Gita, but because Sri Aurobindo is covering these various characters at various places, right? You can gather like a gardener who's stuck in a forest, whatever little flowers you can get, a little one from here, little one from here, you can get that. You are not a full-fledged gardener, you are not a owner of the forest as it, but there are little things that you can get. But you can grab hold of that, you can worship it, you can like it, you can cherish it, you can contemplate on that idea, and it will make its own breach. And once it makes its breach, and then poof, the divine force enters, right? Shakti, she comes in, the mother comes in, and then she can drag you by the tuft of your hair, right? So Savitri gives us that possibility. Now, whether it can lead you to the highest, I think it's more a question of the Swabhava, because in both the same deity is there. The same all divine, the Purushottama is there in both. The question is, can we follow? Have we made the effort? Because, I mean, uh, 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 Gita is giving you the Nirvikalpa Samadhi experience. It's leading you to Savikalpa Samadhi experience. It's leading to the Purushottama, the transcendence experience, and the experience of also functioning in the world. So it's the, I would say, integral yoga of its day. What Sri Krishna did was a synthesis, right? He brought all of these different strands of yoga and he built this synthesis. So of the Mahabharata period, the synthesis of yoga that Sri Aurobindo was writing, that was the Gita. It was the Gita of that time that did the first synthesis. So even it can lead you. The question is, what are you ready for? What are you capable of following or responding to? So I think it's a it's a question of swabhava, right? What your swabhava is ready for. And like I said earlier in one of our sessions, your swabhava need not always be the same, because under the stress and clash of life and aspiration and fire and whatnot, right? You will find that your swabhava changes. You're becoming something else, because once the big boy comes in, once the divine comes in, once he starts pouring stuff into you, you realize that you're capable of things you weren't capable of before. And so one day you prefer the personality of Krishna, and you have fidelity and faith in his word, and you are obeying him. Because why? Because he is Krishna. And once you grow up a little, you come back to Savitri, you see that it's glowing with a different light to you. And then suddenly it becomes Savitri. So so I don't typically make these distinctions between either of these books, because like I said, I feel like a beggar. Anyone who gives me food, I'll eat it. So, and I don't mean just these books, right? Because I've derived great aid and succor from completely unrelated places, movies, music, paintings, there's so many things. So, because if you say that Sri Krishna is Sarva Vallabha, he is all capable, right? He's omniscient. He can do whatever the hell he wants. Which means, I don't mean this from a he will do arbitrary nonsense, right? I don't mean from that perspective. When I say Sarva Vallabha, He's the world teacher who can teach me from anywhere. He can teach me from the flower, from a butterfly, from a book. He has no limitation. Am I a good enough student who looks for his word, for the guiding word, the illuminating word from all of his aspects of existence? Now, if I did that, then I find there is no distinction. He can give me some message of the Gita, the aspect of the Gita from a tribal man standing on a bus stand. He can show me what a warrior looks like, what a hero looks like, what a unmoved compassion looks like. He gives me that instance. Now, are your eyes open? Are our eyes open? How are our hearts open? That determines. If you hang on to that poise, then it doesn't matter what book you take, you can always catch it.
Okay, thank you so much. And that just one last thing I want to ask is any external what should I say, characteristics of a person who is, on the who is enlightened or yeah,
You know why I laugh? You know why I laugh? Because this is exactly what Arjuna asks Sri Krishna in the Gita. He says, "What? How does he move? How does the God knower move? How does he walk? How does he talk?" Exactly the same question. And please go read the Gita and see what Sri Krishna says. He gives a bunch of signs, and none of them are external. And
no,
none
I
of them are
have.
external. Yeah, so the short answer is you cannot recognize a God knower unless you yourself are a God knower. Until you have had the real, and at whatever level you have seen him. So if you have seen him vitally, for example, I'll give you a good example, right? So let's say you have seen the gods of let's say you're a musician, let's say you're a good musician, for example, right? If you're a good musician and you have dwelt with the spirit of the music, the muse of music, you've been intimate with it, it speaks to you on demand, you have mastery over your instrument to receive the inspiration, right? If you have done all of that, if you look at a good musician at play, you know the spirit has touched him, you know he has spoken to the muse of music. It's the same thing with, let's say, a programmer, right? If he has done, hardcore programming, and the moment he sees 5 lines of code written by another programmer, he exactly knows, do you know problem solving? Have you understood the craft, the science behind programming? You can do it. You can judge it. Similarly, it's only one God knower that can go know another God knower, because he can fool you. Yeah, and he takes great pleasure in fooling you. That's why in one of Sri Aurobindo's poems, uh, uh, the poem is called The Mahatmas, and it's a beautiful poem again. In one of his poems, one of the sages will send the seeker saying, go find Sri Krishna has taken birth in the world. He says, go find him. He's there in the world. The guy who will sort of save Kali has come down again. He says, go. Sri Krishna, the heart of the world is there. He says, go find him. Now, even before he gets to this point, right, he would have done great tapasya, he would have attained many realizations, and then he would have gone to the sage, and the sage would say, boss, go to him. Now, so this Sri Aurobindo will describe this process where this Mahatmas, right, this great sage, is searching across all temples. He says, can't find ashrams, can't find. He says, the great schools, the philosophical schools, can't find markets, can't find anywhere, nowhere. And the guy is sort of despairing, saying, Krishna is there, but I can't meet him. And so he says, Sri Aurobindo will say in that poem that, this guy, he wandered into the hills. He wandered into the mountains. He went off into the mountains. And then he says at one point, he says, the wild Abhirs, Abhir, looks like it's the name of a tribe. He says, in the wild Abhirs, there was a guy who was barely clothed, who was laughing and jumping, dancing like a madman. He says, in him I saw the spirit of the world. In him, in that wild Abhir. Now imagine this educated type like us, so-called, right? With this little knowledge, with this little thing. If Sri Krishna comes like a wild Abhir, you won't even understand. You will shrink, will walk away. And I also like to also illustrate the sequence, right? So to the wild abbot, this guy goes and surrenders. He gives all his tapasya, sadhana, all he has done, right? To get to that point, he has done enormous work. Okay, and he goes and surrenders it. He offers it in Saranagati to that wild abbot, and guess what that wild abbot does? He kicks him. He kicks him and he says, "Beggar, take back your gifts." Now, imagine for a moment, let's say 20 plus years of sadhana, and let's say another perhaps 15, 20 years, right? And at the end of it, you go surrender saying, "My master," and the master says, moron, useless, what a useless, 50 years of existence or whatever, right? Imagine how it would feel. Are you ready for it? Are we ready for it? Am I? I do not know. At the moment, maybe not. If I know it's Krishna, I'll probably tolerate it. But I'll be pissed saying, what the hell? I worked so hard to get here, right? So we do not know. It's very hard to. So you need to have realized at whatever level. So if you have realized God at the level of prana, you will realize, you will know, you can find another being of prana. For example, you know how Bhima recognizes Anjaneya, right? So he's son of Vayu, right? Of the prana principle. Now, even he couldn't get him immediately. He couldn't understand. He didn't get it. But later, after a few conversations, he says, "Holy shit, oh, same Vayu. See, that's why even I'm so powerful. Only then he gets it." So, no, short answer is there are no external signs. You'll have to taste him once at whatever level of your being, and at that level, whoever else is, then you can catch them. Otherwise, not.
Right. So it takes one to know one, right? And
Yes,
in
yes,
some
yes.
ways, right? Yeah. So I want to, why I asked you this, Kailash? Because people often judge, like for example, if somebody gets angry, say for example, one person, sorry, is my voice visible? I keep getting, sorry, my voice is audible
Yeah, yeah.
because I'm getting network connection. Okay, poor network connection. Huh? Okay, so you know what happens if this person who has kind of done whatever, reached whatever, like you said, if somebody has reached the prana level, will be able to recognize another person. I'm saying, but usually people judge others who are walking on this path of spirituality or seems to have attained some sort of grace, even a partial some knowledge or wisdom, uh, and if this person tends to get angry sometimes, then
Mhm.
others judge him. Are, if you're so spiritual, if you're so, how can you get angry, how can you abuse, how can you do that? So that's silly, right? That's absolutely silly to think like
Absolutely.
that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's got to do with the standard formulae that have been erected in the human mind. When I say standard formulae, because someone who wears a certain icon, a certain symbol of the divine, who wears ochre robe or a white robe, there is this mental habit that sort of has built this association that this is what the divine is all about. And that is where not Sri Aurobindo, even Sri Krishna makes this point, right? Remember this particular point. When Arjuna, when Sri Krishna says, I've come here in many, many bodies, and this is just, one instance of my lifetime. And Sri Arjuna asks this question. So if you say that you have been here many, many times and you're all these forms, he says, give me some names, give me some examples. And you remember that very famous passage, right? And it's a very profound passage, and people have not understood it sufficiently enough. He says, of the Pandavas, I'm Arjuna. So he'll pick the best of everything, right? He'll pick the best of everything and he'll say, of this, and this, of this, and this. Now, see what's happening. So, what Sri Krishna is essentially saying is, and he himself says it, whenever you see the best of anything, he says, no, to be me, right? So, if I'm in Europe, let's say 200, 300 years back, the best general, for example, Napoleon, right? And he's sort of, marching across Europe, shattering everybody on his way. Best general, right? So our perspective, as in sadhaks, right? Yoga sadhana performers like us, we need to immediately say that's a form of Krishna, right? That's a form of the divine. Carl Lewis, form of the divine.
Oh,
Mike
Hitler,
Tyson,
Hitler, right?
form of the divine. Yeah, 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 yeah. A form of the divine. right? Because such tremendous energy, where it's coming from? In a body which seems just like ours. It comes in a negative shape, right? Cruelty, brutality, etc. Ashuric temperament, but still the divine. Still
Whom
the
are
divine.
you sorry, whom did you this Ashudik, whom are you talking about? What is that name that you take?
No, no. Napoleon was known to be a vibhuti, right?
Huh.
Vibhuti of the divine. But Sir mentioned Hitler, and I'm saying even that, even him, Ashura, but you can't become the instrument of an Ashura or an Ashura so easily, right? You need to have enormous, tremendous amount of capacity to withstand that much amount of evil, that much amount of force, right? So the point that I'm trying to make is you take the best of anything, you see we must understand that there is something of the divine energy working there. Now, should it be all saintly? Should it be like a monk who will take some beatings from a robber? No, no. If you have been an annoying pest, for example, to a so-called sage, right? And if he wants to swat you, he's giving you the reaction that you're supposed to get because you have been annoying. You can't expect, not all gods are Vishnu, right? For example, there are other deities, there are harsher deities. You go wag your tail with Kali, she'll smash you in no time, right?
Excellent. What do we do? Do we want to
No,
continue the thing,
so
or
no,
yeah, go on,
listen.
Shiva. Yeah, go on,
I
Shiva.
actually my question never got completed, never got understood. But only only if Kalisji is ready. I want to still ask my last, please. I
Yes, yes,
want
madam.
to.
Not a problem. Please fire away.
Shimmer.
Precious.
Okay.
His
Huh.
his name is Mahesh. It's not Callus. It's Kali's. Kali's brood. It's
Kali's. Okay,
Kali.
okay. Mahesh ji. Okay, I will say
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so my question is, Khalish, Mahesh ji, that see, I've put it in your back channel also, but I'll just say, see,
Hmm.
till a person becomes now don't I want everybody not to hold on to this Hitler thing very much. I just want to convey an idea. So okay, now for
Hmm.
somebody to become a judicious destructive force on this
Hmm.
earth, okay, you
Hmm.
said it is given by the divine. I understand that completely. The person becomes a vessel of destruction only when it comes from the divine.
Hmm.
Then only it is justified.
Hmm.
I'm saying till
Hmm.
then till then till the person is has reached that state
Hmm.
of becoming a divine vessel, till
Hmm.
then the path which a person is supposed to walk there. See, one cannot aim to become a destructive force one fine day, right? Ek din मैं destructive force बनूंगा, and that is why let me prepare for all these things, है ना, battle and fighting and all those
True,
things. No, na.
true. Hmm.
Right. So my main question is that till let the divine purpose come later. You could
Hmm.
become a person who can be a butcher. You can be a person who will become a priest.
True.
Let it come later.
Hmm.
I'm saying till then, till a person is trying to work on that, is walking on that path. At that time, shouldn't the path of always doing the right thing, compassion. That's why I used the word sattva. What I meant was, till then, are we not supposed to imbibe good feelings, chitta shuddhi, and good for everybody and all those things? Yeah, that's my question.
Wonderful question. And this requires a careful, I mean, I can't give a formulaic answer because the right answer depends on the context and the swabhava which is facing that context. So it's in the combination of both these that the right action is present. Let me just so the point that you're saying is it needs to lead to harmony and sattva and everything, right? Yes, that is the normal yardstick that you have to follow, right? Typical yardstick, because until the divine guidance, the adesha can come from inside, because that takes a long time to happen, right? Until the adesha can come from inside, you'll have to follow the human laws, the human norms. That's what you have to follow. But while doing that, you will find yourself placed in situations where you realize that compassion is coming from a position of weakness. For example, let's say let's say you're not physically well built, for example, right? You find a ruffian beating up a old woman on the street. If you had the power, you would go smash his face. Now, what are you going to do? Will you walk away from the conflict? Will you allow adharma to happen without your force intervening? Now, what if you're weak? Because I already said that you're weak. You're a coward. You've never fought before. but you very much would like to go establish order there, right? Now, in such a situation, your compassion, your equality, your equanimity is a thing of cowardice. It's cowardice. Now, you can say that I'm not physically equipped. Fine. Now, if you're not physically equipped, then go do something that fixes that weakness. Where, if tomorrow you couldn't handle that situation before, tomorrow, when a situation arises where Adharma is sort of trying to have the upper hold, you will go smash it. Right? You have to be ready to smash it because that is the Dharma. See, here is where people misunderstand it, and misunderstand this very heavily, right? When you talk about the divine, and this is what I was hinting at, when you talk about the divine in everything, just because the divine is in everything, you can't go kiss the snake or you can't go kiss the enemy. That's the wrong application of dharma. What is the right application of dharma for you? If you see an enemy, strike him. Strike him with all the fury that you are capable of, with all the cunning that you are capable of. You will have to strike him down. But while striking him, no cruelty. Strike him, finish him, clean, and tell the Krishna within him, this is all the knowledge you gave me. This is what you taught me. I'm doing this, right? But I have no hatred for that fellow. I, it's a duty. I have to kill. I have to kill because that's how you placed it in front of me. But if you then appeal to Krishna, saying, give me that larger understanding where I know whether I should forgive this fellow or I should fight. And then he'll give you that insight. He'll give you that insight because the way he looks at the problem is not just the welfare of the world. He's also looking at your inner growth. Your inner growth. He is training you, he's molding you so that you are prepared for greater and greater participation in his Leela. And
Right.
you will find there, that it is not always this way of peace and flowers and honey and all of that.
Hemanji,
He
only
will
So,
drag you
so
into
one second,
conflict.
Spice Ji. Yeah. So,
Mhm,
Kailash Ji, that means the
mhm,
what one can do. Sorry, Mahesh Ji, what one can do is
mhm,
try to understand the. Is like for example, try to understand Bhagavad Gita. Try to understand what God is. Try to understand what the truth is. The absolute, and then that understanding when it comes, that is where your act, any act undertaken by you, becomes a wholesome and true act. I mean, aligned act.
yes.
An act is aligned only when it is taken under knowledge, true knowledge,
Mhm,
under the influence of true knowledge.
mhm,
And so what one can probably just do till then is, apart
mhm,
from living the daily life and doing the best you can, of course, but the idea
mhm.
is to understand the absolute truth, do whatever it takes to understand the absolute truth, so that you operate from that space ultimately,
Yeah,
right?
ultimately, yes. One small tweak I'll do to what you just mentioned, an agreement, but one small semantic tweaking, right? The truth that people claim to understand is a multi-dimensional, many-dimensional thing, and the mind cannot approach it. There is no amount of mental wrangling that will give you vision of that truth. That is why in that Upanishad, when Indra goes to the Yaksha disappears. That capital truth, T, cannot be grasped with the mind. It will have to reveal itself to you, like Sri Krishna revealed himself to Arjuna. It will come and tell you what it is. Now,
So
that is an
till then what?
experience.
So
Till
till
then,
then,
you use the lesser sun of knowledge, wisdom, whatever you have available for your level of training, for your level of growth. That is the Gita for you. Follow it, ascend,
yeah,
grow
yeah,
in
but how
experience.
does one know that one is following? Now this is where I'm asking, that what is one to do till that lesser. I understand, see, you can take horse to the water, but the horse has to drink the water, or rather you
Absolutely,
roam with,
absolutely,
yeah. So
absolutely,
I
absolutely.
understand that part, but how do we know that we have taken the horse only, it is not a donkey, and that we are
The
roaming around?
the
That's,
the, the only touchstone, and that's why I always come back to this, the only touchstone is spiritual experience. When you get the experience, you know you're in the right direction. If you have not got the experience, then it means that you are either on the path or you have not progressed. Only two possibilities, right? Right? So aspire for experience, plead with the divine, tell the divine, saying, I do not know what I'm doing. I don't want to die in this lifetime. I don't want to die without knowing you. Give me a glimpse, beg. And he listens. The damned guy listens. He listens, she listens. You cry for long enough, they'll come. Well, one experience, then it's blotted. All this confusion, this gyan is all blotted out. Then you just know. And it doesn't require a guru to come and tell you, or a Mahesh, or a Hemant, or the sir who spoke just now. It doesn't require any of us to confirm, because it is a self-affirming fact. You will know it. You will wake up like a being possessed. You will wake up like a being possessed. The change that Sri Aurobindo was speaking of in Savitri, when she goes into meditation, the air around Savitri is changing. And when the goddess comes out of her, the incarnation is coming out of Savitri, the way he's describing the facial expressions change, all the chakras are these are unmistakable phenomena. You,
Right.
even if one of it touches, you know for a fact that you're on the path.
See,
That is the test.
see, Mahesh,
Mm,
actually, now experiences I've had, and I know what you're talking about.
mm,
But tell
mm,
me, why then there is a doubt? See, what about the, like, people who say that hallucinations also are similar, right? Now, how does one, again, I'm telling you, the experience is so real. Of course, I am on the spiritual path. I am wherever I am till now because I know what the experience was, and there is no doubt about it. Okay,
mm, mm,
so
mm,
I know I'm walking the path fine, and no
mm.
amount of people can discourage me from there. Okay, because I've
Absolutely. Mm,
experienced it.
mm,
Now, my question is that, but
mm,
in scientific field, in medical field, they
mm.
have told about hallucinations and people who go berserk, right? They get into these things.
You
Now,
know,
yeah.
Sri Aurobindo has a nice aphorism for this, right? He says, I don't remember the exact words, but I'm just paraphrasing, right? So he says all your powers and siddhis. He says the world considers these as madnesses, right? He says that's what the world says. The world says this is the ways of a madman. And Sri Krishna says, what do I prefer? He says, what do I prefer? The madnesses that gives me Krishna, or the logic of the world that gives me the logic of the world? What do I want? Now, that's where you have to have spiritual courage to look dumb, to look idiotic, to look like a failure in front of the world, right? Because if you've got the experience, you know you're on the path, what are you afraid of? You ought to stand in front of everybody and say, this is me. I am mad. I am the gopi of Sri Krishna.
Yes.
You can do what you want. The world can do what it wants. It
So,
doesn't matter.
so finally, now
Mhm,
comes the last part where I'm going to say this is not a question,
mhm,
but this is
mhm.
what proves that grace, it is only the people who receive the grace are able to walk on this path because they are able to take that badge of being a mad person in front of everybody and yet walk the path and, and trust the experiences which they have happened, and with all that thing walk the path as if it is a river running to a sea and moth to a flame, no choice but to follow that path. And so there are the people who are disbelievers, and then there are believers. There are people who are graced, and people who are, though grace is always functioning but not open to it yet for whatever reason, right?
Yeah, yeah, agree. Wonderful. Yeah,
From
yes.
Shima's personal experience, I can say that lot has been happened since I have experienced something. And sometimes at my home, my wife calls me that I have lost. I'm like a dead man walking. She says, I don't know. I don't have any Vyavaharga and how the world is operating. I'm in my own world, but I know where I am. You know, and now people have started realizing around me that where I am. It's an arduous journey, but not a single day my mind has flickered and questioned it. And I'm sharing it right now, and I shared it with my guru. The day I saw her feet, that's the only glimpse I had. I thought it passed in few seconds, but my wife told me that I was in meditation for 6 hours. For me, it was just
Beautiful.
a glimpse. I saw her feet. My guru immediately messaged me from Rishikesh saying that, Urvesh, I was sitting in Kali Mandir. I know what you have experienced. I'm going to give you the Krishna part of the mantra, what he has given me as a Guru mantra. So I have experienced it, and I'm still in that place of drunkenness. Sometimes I don't know. I'm coming, going where it is, what it is, but it's just different. It's just different. My close relatives, my brother, my father, they are worried about me. I'm not, because I come from the place of that abhayam, that security, that being encased in her womb, The warmth of her womb is around me, and it is protecting me forever. It has realized me, no, and I'm talking you from what it has come from, because every atom of my body has absorbed that knowledge, and it has given me assurance that I might take birth after birth, but I will never suffer. I am liberated. Pain might come and go, but the suffering won't be there. That's the thing which I have got from her, and that happened. But the intention was one focused, you know, and the worldly affair has been looked after. I don't have to go worrying about how my house is going to run. Everything is there, and day by day it is increasing in manifold. But I don't have to worry about. And this is the beauty of that experience. And I don't know when I'll see her whole form, but the feet, I wish I was a poet. I would have described it, but I'm not great with my. I can speak, but that's what it is.
But Spice G, tell me,
Glorious,
would you?
glorious, and and uh,
Beautiful.
and and to that experience and experiencer and the enabler, to all of them, my humble pranams, my very very humble pranams.
It is amazing, Maheshi. I'll tell you, I can just describe her feet: blue hue with alta, and the anklets. I have never seen those anklets in my life. And that is what it was. It was surrounded by a garden of lotus. That much I have it in front of me. Nothing else.
And may
And
that
just
feet
feet.
land on our heads, may that
Yes.
feet
I, I,
land on our
And the
heads.
nail, the toenail. Oh my God, the beauty of that toenail. I'm getting goosebumps. I can see that. But that was it is.
uh,
Pranam, sir.
Spice G.
Virtual and physical from here.
Spicy, what a beautiful experience you had. And like Maheshji said, yeah, really, the prostrations to that particular thing, which you experienced. And may we also be blessed with the same. My just point is, Spicy, that if somebody does not get a Sagun Sakar vision, even Nirgun Nirakar, even the essence of it is equally. um Hmm. Revered, right? It's not necessary that one has to get Sagun Sakar, right?
True, true,
What do you
true.
think?
No, true, true, 100% true. But I tell you further, adding to my experience, I sit in meditation in front of mirror, and now whenever I open my eyes after my meditation, and I don't know, hours goes into it, in mirror I can see the person, that's me, but it's not me. There is an entire body covered with ash. That's all I can see, and that is that is very profound.
As they say somewhere, one unrelated quote from Sri Aurobindo, he says, "He who seeks the divine is sought by the divine." Right? That's one aspect. But there's another aspect of, informed by bhakti. And if I sort of wear that sort of a poise, informed by bhakti, somewhere it is only Shiva who knows how to call Shakti, right? So, you seeing yourself in an ash form, I would say, is very apt and not surprising because, the Shiva you calls her only then she responds. Otherwise, to normal riffraff, why would she respond? So again, to both of them. And in Tamil, as they say, to Ammai and Appan of the worlds, my you know calls, cries as a child. So yeah.
I have to share something here. I found Mahesh on Twitter some 7 or 8 years ago, and what struck me was his poetry. And I've told him on Twitter a few years ago, and when I met him recently, it was as if he has stolen my poem. Anything I have written, he's written in English. And one thing particularly blew me. Um, where Mahesh was describing a seeing, um, and I can't remember the title or even the words. It's just, it blew me because that was exactly my experience. And I had written about it. I had written a poem about it also. I woke up with a seed mantra. I was not sleeping. It was not a dream. It was very real. And to see that, and after meeting Mahesh and just exchanging life stories, to see that our lives have traversed the same similar path,
See, similar path. It's
Yeah,
crazy,
what
right? The
we call it as
concordance.
twin flames, you are twin flames.
And,
which is yeah.
right here, there is a series of aphorisms by Master, where he says, "Mind is the helper, mind is the bar."
Mm,
It's a series actually, So he'll go layer after layer. He'll go layer after layer, just like the Upanishads, the way they attack, the Annam portion and the Prana portion and the Manomaya Purusha and so on, right?
mm,
Similarly, you would see Sri Aurobindo slicing in that series of aphorisms where he'll clearly tell you mind is the helper, mind is the bar. So, and that's another skill that we have to learn, right? As
mm,
in to utilize logic and discrimination so that you can evaluate your experience, your conduct in the world, your pursuit of the sadhana, which involves very, great amount of discriminative thought, right? You're thinking this out at crazy levels of logic, right?
mm,
You're doing that, but at the same time, the moment you find the mind being a bar, for example, like Shivaji was saying, right? If the world says this is hallucination, Krishna's hallucination, then you ask yourself, what do you want? What would you much rather have? I'd much rather have one Krishna rather than 2 billion population of the world. I don't want
mm,
that. So,
mm,
so there you will have to suspend the mind. You will have to let go of the mind. Now, this is the spiritual subtlety, the
mm,
suppleness that you require, where your heart is stone when it comes to logic. But
mm,
when you have to dispense logic, you throw it away. And you will find this most beautifully in Sri Ramakrishna, right? Because our man is looking like a simpleton, where all these college educated boys, I mean, Swami Vivekananda and all his friends, right? We are treating him like like a fakir,
mm,
like a normal sadhu, penniless sadhu on the thing. That's how they are treating him. But when it comes to, you will also realize how he treats them, right? He'll say, press my leg, sing for me, eat this, you know. All these have absolutely nothing to do with spirituality, right?
mm,
Very common interaction. But the moment, and you will find that the moment he wants to teach a lesson to a particular fellow, right? To a particular. Recently, I read this little experience where it seems Swami Brahmananda, when he was young, he was a very haughty boy because he was from a rich family, very noble family and so on. Mm. So when Thakur asked him, saying, press my leg, it seems he refused. He said, no, I won't do. Why should I do? To you, that too. Right? So, and it seems he kept insisting, right? Sri Ramakrishna, Paramahamsa,
mm,
he's kept insisting, saying, no, press, no, do it, do it. Now, you look at the play of logic, right? You look at the play of logic, and there is some amount of ego involved, but it's a kid, right? It's a college going kid. What else do you expect from him, right? But but he cracks through that barrier. Who? Sri Ramakrishna cracks through that barrier, that resistance of Brahmananda, and the boy comes and presses his leg. And guess what? As he presses his leg, starts the experience. Brahmananda sees a 8 or 11-year-old Kali, girl
mm,
Kali,
mm,
Kali, making a round around Sri Ramakrishna. Sri Ramakrishna is lying down, she's just going around like a little girl around the bed, and she jumps and vanishes into his chest. And Brahmananda is astounded. And then Thakur, Sri Ramakrishna, says, I wanted to show you this.
mm,
Ah, look at that, look at that. Now they are fooling around, the mind is at play, logic is at play. Now, once you have that experience, you have to suspend your mind. You can't go ask, was it a hallucination? Was this a trick of the head? Did he give me drugs? If you do that, then you've lost the value of that experience and what it is trying to convey to you. So, most spiritual people learn this at some point, and this is where you realize that you can't be a single formula warrior if you want to practice the Gita properly, right? You have to adapt formulae. You know, you have to adapt. You will have to improvise. It has to be a living realization, a living practice of sadhana, right? And if you
Mhm.
and that's why I said, you know, you attack all the elements, all portions of your being, you attack, and then you realize you grow in suppleness. Like I said, year and a half, intense practice, right? You can at least break through the initial set of veils. You can easily break through, right? Oh, of course, you know, he still might want to fool around with you, but then it's only a play, right? Then, but you can ask him, saying like. Uh, Spice G just said, you know, at least show me your toenail, you know, at least show me that. Show me that you're there, right? So, yeah. Mind is the
and and
helper, mind is the bar.
and,
Mhm.
and I believe that when the conviction of truth is not merely in your brain but in your being, you may differently vouch for the meaning. That's what it is. It has to be in your being, and it's not assimilated with eyes, but it should be within your atoms of your body should feel that truth.
Brilliant. I'm glad you used the word being
Yeah,
because
yeah,
this room is about being. This is the being room. That's why we're
yeah,
being
yeah.
with Savitri. Yeah. Satya has joined the speakers panel. Satya, do you have something to share?
Nothing for now. I will share later. Yeah.
Okay.
I just
You
want
know,
to thank Maheshji. Thanks a lot. I have to go, but
Mm,
thanks a lot, Maheshji. And see you around
welcome.
next time again.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you,
You're
Shimmer.
most
Thank
welcome.
Take
you.
care.
Thank you. Yeah, bye bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
in autobiography of a yogi, Paramhansa Yogananda is writing that his guru says that endless literary controversy is for the shrugged mind. What for more liberating thought than God is a nay God?
Yeah.
I have a question about the title of that book, Autobiography of a Yogi. Does a yogi have an autobiography?
Good
Yes.
Osho
question.
remarks, Heavenji. Remember?
Right, right. Yeah.
Hey, Hemant, the charge on my headset is sort of running
Come
off.
in. Yeah.
So I think I'll have to take leave now because
Yes, yes, it
one
is.
ear
It
is
is. It
gone.
is late. I know it is late. It's been more than 4 hours. So thank you so much, Mahesh. We will reconvene next week. I think it's going to be on Sunday.
Yeah, yeah.
So looking forward to progressing with
Ab-
Savitri. Thank you so
Absolutely,
much, Mahesh.
absolutely. Thank you,
Thank you.
everybody. Thank you. Good
Thank you.
evening.
Thanks,
Good
Thank you.
night.
It
thanks,
was
Maheshji.
brilliant.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you,
Bye.
everybody. Love you all.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
Take care.